At the age of 40, Cain married his wife, the Empress. After that, in the course of the next 10 years, he married 6 more of his wives, of which only 2 became his official wives and the rest became his concubine. He was the sole bloodline holder of the Xander's bloodline, so he tried his best to improve the situation by having a lot of kids. During this period, his father had grown more and more violent, while at the same time becoming sicker and sicker. Cain didn't understand what was going on and none of the doctors gave a straight answer. Until one day, he was called to his father's bedchambers when he was 60 years old. Cain walked in to see his father, weak in his deathbed. Next to him was the general commander of the defense army. "What's going on?" Cain asked. "The emperor wants to speak to you, your highness," the commander said and walked to the corner of the room to let the father-son have some time alone. "Father," Cain said holding onto his hands, "I am here." "Cain," the emperor said in a slow and hoarse voice, I need you to do something for me." "Yes, father, of course," he said. "What do you want?" Go to the Undying Fort, and get the soldiers there to attack the beasts." I need their gems to survive," the emperor said. "Gems? You can survive with gems?" Cain asked, a little happy even. "We have gems at home, father. The zoo had been sending us the cores for quite a while now." "You idiot!" the emperor cried out. "You think I don't know that? I have used it already." "What?" Cain asked in shock. I need you to kill more beasts to bring me the gems." "This useless commander refuses to listen to my orders," the emperor said. Cain turned to look towards the commander. This man had been with his father for nearly 80 years now. He was one of the best ether users in the empire, and yet, he was refusing his own emperor. "Why are you refusing the orders of your emperor?" Cain asked the commander. "I will not follow that order, your highness," the commander said. "I will not help him begin a war that will kill more innocent civilians." "Huh? He's just asking you to kill some beasts. Not start a war," Cain said. The commander still shook his head. "That will start a war with the ether beasts for sure," he said. Cain got a little annoyed. "How can you be so sure?" he asked. The commander looked at him, dead in the eyes, and said, "Because that's how the previous war started." What do you mean?" Cain asked. "It's better if you ask the emperor," the commander said. "What does he mean, father?" Cain turned around to ask. "So what if it starts a war? What does it matter if a few thousand more people die if I get to live?" the emperor shouted. "With the gems, I will continue growing. With the gems, I will continue living on. You don't know how great these ether beasts' gems are. They were exactly what helped me defeat my brothers and take the throne," the emperor shouted. "What? I thought you used your swordsmanship and wit to defeat your brothers," Cain asked. "Swordsmanship? Wit? Pooey. What use are those against pure power? Ever since I was young, I was born weak. However, the gems helped me grow stronger. Now that I'm dying, I need more," the emperor continued shouting. "It's like a drug," the commander spoke from behind him. "The gems, they are like drugs to the emperor. Ever since he found out they increase his strength, he's been taking them. He went as far as to start an entire war using a fake premise that the beasts were attacking us, when in fact, the war had started much earlier, and they were just retaliating back. You have read the reports, your highness. You know what the war did. So many villages and cities were destroyed. So many soldiers died in the front line. So many of my own men died," the commander said. "By the time I noticed what was happening, the war was already over. This is why I won't help you in anything you want to do," the commander said. "Father, that's not true, right?" he asked, fearfully. "Are you not listening to my orders too? Have your mind gone to the chamber pots as well?" the emperor cried out. "Father, we can't do this. The war destroyed so many people. If we start another such war, Xandria itself will suffer a great catastrophe," Cain said. "You think I care? Just get me the gems. Go," the emperor shouted. Cain finally understood that his father had far gone. The gems, the drug, its addiction had not only made him weak, but it had also affected his mind. Perhaps it had affected him from the very start. He decided to take a stance. "No, father. If what you want brings destruction to the empire, then I will not let you do it," he said. "Useless," the emperor said after hearing his son. "I let you have too much freedom, and now this is what I suffer because of it. I don't need such a son," the emperor shouted and brought out a sword from his storage and cut towards Cain. Cain dodged backward. The emperor was now standing up straight, his body and face's vein bulging from the enormous stress he was suffering. Your Highness, the commander moved forward to protect the prince. However, the emperor didn't stop. He attacked the commander too like a madman. The commander couldn't fight back against his own emperor, so he was forced to stay on the defensive. Cain was in shock, looking at the craziness in his father's eyes. The same eyes that loved him, they were now looking at him with hatred and intention to kill. The emperor was just too strong. Slowly, without any offensive threat, the emperor started beating the commander. Just then, from behind the commander, the prince ran forth, and drove a sword through his father's heart. After killing his own father, Cain never remained the same. Soon after Kron died, Cain did his best to clear up any confusion and fabricated a story that said his father died from an old wound he got when he fought the beasts. The civilians ate that story up like a freshly baked cake. After that, Cain took the throne as the emperor of Xandria. The empire felt saddened over their old emperor's death, but Cain's succession brought joy to all of them. While the empire rejoiced, Cain couldn't feel the same himself. The death, no, murder of his father had left a deep scar in him. He would randomly wake up at night, the nightmares of his father's death still haunting him even when he woke up. Every night, the nightmare came, followed by a screaming shout of his father's voice that called him a bastard as he had died. Cain would wake up, full of sweat in the middle of the night, scaring the empress who would also wake up. His hands shook with fear, the same hands that killed his father. Even when the empress tried to console him, it was all right, he couldn't accept it. After all, she had no idea what he had done to protect himself and the empire. As the nightmares continued, he didn't feel safe for him to stay around his family, so he made a separate bedchamber for himself and slept there alone. He had already harmed one of his family, what if he harmed more? Thinking so, he stopped visiting his wives and children. He separated himself from his family so that he never lost himself like how he did against his father. It was a defensive instinct that had kicked into him from all the sword training he had gone through. Still, he couldn't guarantee that he would never repeat it again, especially since even to this day, the thought of his father's death kept on haunting him. And now, his father was somehow back to haunt him through his own son. Ning listened to the tale of the broken man who kept it all bottled up, never revealing what he knew and felt to anyone, letting the weight of what he knew to sink him deeper and deeper onto his own void. This was not what he had expected of the emperor to be like. He expected a valiant man like in the stories, but he was instead a lonely man, being trampled by his own memories. You don't have to say anything else, Ning said, not wanting to let the man suffer the thoughts anymore. Was that why you wanted the gem? To increase your ether rank? Ning asked. Yes, the first prince said. Grandfather wrote that he got strong enough to defeat his brothers using the ether gems, so I believed I could do the same as well. The emperor took deep breaths to calm himself. Ning wasn't sure if he heard what his son said or not, but he decided to continue with his questioning. Did you not care about the empire's tradition? As far as I know, your grandfather had blonde hair, which you do not, Ning asked. While he himself didn't care much for the tradition, he also didn't want to speak against it since it was something that had been going on in this empire since before he came here. I did, the first prince said. However, I had plans for that situation as well. The emperor looked at him too this time. He wanted to know what his son's plan was to become an emperor despite not holding the blonde hair. You're not going to say you will dye your hair, are you? Ning jokingly asked. No, the prince said. I was going to kill all three of the successors. When they died, I would be the only one remaining that would become the emperor for sure. Things just got a lot serious. Ning could visibly see how fast the emperor's facial expression was changing. You were going to kill your own brothers and sister? The emperor got angry at his son. He didn't waste a second and slapped his son in the face. This was perhaps the first time in a long time since he had even touched his own children, and the first thing he did was hit him. However, Ning was surprised to see the emperor was fine, at least for now, and not floored on the ground like the broken man he was. You dared to even think of killing our brothers and sisters? The emperor asked angrily. When he did, a certain thought entered Ning's mind. His eyes narrowed and a serious look appeared on his face. Were you only planning on doing this, or did you already put it into motion? Ning asked. I have already tried multiple times and failed, the prince said. What? The emperor cried out. You were the one behind the attack. Yes, the prince said. Attack? What attack? Ning asked. It didn't seem like the two of them were speaking about the same thing he was thinking of, which was the incident on the train. The attack on the palace 10 years ago, where my seventh wife died, where Elizabeth ran away from, where my other wives and children were in some ways harmed, the emperor said with anger rising from within him. That was you? Yes, the prince answered. You? How did you get in contact with the Shadow Pavilion? What payment did you give them to dare attack the royal family of Xandria? The emperor asked. I learned that one of the guards was a member and contacted the organization through them. It didn't take very long to get a reply back saying they will help me with the task, the prince spoke. As for payment, I made them a promise. The emperor's eyes narrowed, his fury still visible in those eyes. What promise? He asked. If I became the emperor, I would give them 200 kilos of ether ores. The royal family of Xandria only held about a ton of ether ores in their inventory, which was the largest portion of their wealth. Giving away 20% of it to a criminal organization, Cain couldn't believe that his son would even think of doing such a thing. The attack on the train, was that you as well? Ning asked. Which attack? The prince asked. The one when your sister was returning back to the capital, Ning said. Yes, that was me too, he said. While the emperor was in shock at the horrific things his son had planned towards his own family, Ning started getting curious about how he even got the news. Just the next morning, the assassins were on the train. We hadn't told them we were returning or anything. How did they even recognize us? He wondered. When exactly did you learn about your sister's existence? Ning asked. Right after my cousin called my uncle. I was the first one to learn since I was with my uncle, the prince said. Your uncle? Ning asked confusedly. The prince didn't have a sibling, so where did the uncle come from? Ning couldn't help but wonder. The Duke, he's my brother-in-law, the emperor said from the side. Ah, I see. That makes sense, Ning said. That makes a lot of sense. He finally realized why they were attacked so fast. He understood why the terrorists were in the Duke's house. He understood why he was attacked today, and understood why the terrorists had wanted the gems. It was all because of this piece of a shit prince. The emperor's face was unsightly. His son hadn't just tried to kill the royal family members, his plan was going to kill himself, just like his father did. The emperor started shaking once more as his thoughts ran wild. He imagined a day when he himself would have to kill his son, just as he did to his father. Ning saw this and couldn't help but sympathize with the emperor. Over the course of the last 40 years, his father's death still haunted him. Guards! He shouted. He couldn't bring himself to deal with his son as he couldn't trust himself to not hurt him. The guards that were sent outside came back in a hurry. Your Majesty, they kneeled before him. Take my son and escort him out to the front of the palace. Then, give him 50 lashes. From today onwards, he is to not hold the status of a royal family member and is to be forever be kept to his own chambers. He shall never be allowed freedom, the emperor announced. The guards wore shocked faces, but they did what they were told to do. Ning silently removed his domination skill from the prince, and suddenly, the prince started shouting. Father, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, father. Please don't punish me. Father, please, he cried out as he was dragged away by the guards. The punishment seemed quite tame for someone with such horrific plans in his mind. He had even killed his own stepmother. Ning wanted to at least cut an arm or a leg, but he supposed that was perhaps because he didn't understand the love of a father. He could see the emperor beat himself up on the inside while watching his son get taken away. He did what was right, but that still hurt him. Ning could hear the sound of the empress crying outside while her son was dragged to the front. The emperor stood up and walked outside as well. He went to the front of the palace, where the people were already gathering to see what was happening. The emperor then gave an announcement, letting the people learn of the prince's punishment. He kept the crime as vague as possible, but those who knew even the slightest about what had happened could point their fingers towards him. Lisa was there. She cried, learning that the reason her mother died that night during the assassin attack was because of her eldest brother. The empress asked the emperor to rethink the punishment, but the emperor wouldn't budge. The crowd watched as the emperor's guards lashed the prince a full 50 times, and then he was dragged away. The emperor returned back to the throne room and Ning walked behind him. As soon as he entered the room, he fell to the ground and started crying. He couldn't show his vulnerable self on the outside, but on the inside, he cried. Ning had seen it all already, so the emperor didn't care about him. This is all my fault, the emperor said. I was too passive in my choice of a successor. Had I made it clear that one of them would become the successor, this would have likely not have happened. Don't beat yourself over it. You would have only increased the threat on that one person if you had made a choice, Ning said. Although, it would have helped settle down internal conflicts if you did choose. I thought it was obvious, the Emperor said. Adrian doesn't like doing anything political, and Elizabeth was happy in the City of Beginnings. So, I thought it was obvious that Jillian was the one that would be my successor. I see, so he always knew where his daughter was, Ning thought. He saw the Emperor start to have a hard time breathing again as he realized what they had done to another one of his family. This guy's trauma, Ning sighed. Do you want my help? Ning asked. The Emperor calmed himself and asked, help with what? I can get rid of your memory of your father's death. You will remember it to be just as everyone else does, Ning said. The Emperor looked up in surprise. You can do that? He asked. Yes, I will remove the prince's memories too, Ning said. Once I remove the memory, no one in the Empire, but I will remember the truth. No, one more person will remember the truth, the Emperor said. Who? Ning asked, but then he remembered. The Commander General. Where is he? I will remove his memories too. He is in the City of Beginnings right now, the Emperor said. The City of Beginnings? Ning asked in surprise. Yes, he's the one that helped my daughter survive the assassin attack 10 years ago, the Emperor said. Ning realized who he was talking about. The boss. Ning removed the Emperor's memory. From now on, he wouldn't wake up in the dead of night, recalling his father's haunting death. He also removed all knowledge about the prince's grandfather's diary from the prince. I can't believe removing memories was this simple, Ning thought. He left the prince's chambers and went to his room. Lisa must be quite sad, he thought. Learning the truth about her mother's death, learning that it was related to her eldest brother couldn't have been easy for her. Well, at least she's not Al. Shit. Ning disappeared at once and appeared just outside the desert where Reaver was selling his stuff now. Ning walked up to him and asked, You doing fine? Brother Ning, you're back. I thought I would have had to go to the city tonight, Reaver said. How long before you are done here? Your wife needs you right now, Ning said. Lisa needs me? Why? Reaver asked. There's been a revelation in the palace, Ning said. It's better if you end it quickly and return back. One moment, Reaver turned around. Everyone, listen up. You don't have to sell me anything. Do what you've been doing all this time, grab a train and go to the city to sell all you want. You will earn a lot more than you were with me. Here, Reaver threw a storage locket at the people. There are flour and dry food in there, eat accordingly. Let's go. Reaver turned around and walked with Ning. Ning teleported him back to the palace, and Reaver immediately went to give company to Lisa. He on the other hand had nothing to do anymore. It was starting to get dark outside, so he went to lay on his bed. It had truly been a long day. However, he felt like there was one more thing he had to do before he went to sleep, so he disappeared. Ning woke up early in the morning and went to have breakfast. However, before he could reach the kitchen, Old Man Tim found him. Damn it, he better not bother me about yesterday's conflict. I don't have the time for that, he thought. Ning, can you come with me? Old Man Tim asked. What is it, Senior Tim? Ning asked while following behind him. His Majesty is looking for you, the old man said. Oh, Ning was a little surprised. He hadn't thought the Emperor would want to see him this early. Ning followed him and went to the throne room where the Emperor was waiting for him. Thank you for coming, Mr. Ning, the Emperor said from on top of his throne. You called me Your Majesty. Of course, I have to come, Ning said. Oh, you're addressing me respectfully today, the Emperor said in a jovial tone. Old Man Tim, who was standing behind Ning, couldn't believe what he was seeing. His Emperor, who was known to be stoic, sometimes even gloomy around the morning, was speaking so cheerfully. What happened? He wondered. Tim, you can leave, the Emperor said. Yes, Your Majesty. Tim backed away slowly and left out of the door. So, why was I called here today? Ning asked. First of all, let me ask you, what ether rank are you? The Emperor asked. I would rather not say it out loud, Ning said. Very well, the Emperor said. And, your ability to heal despite being stabbed through the chest? Ning smiled at the Emperor. I see, the Emperor understood he was getting no answers. Here's the reason I called you. Ning listened intently. I am facing a bit of opposition from my own family because of your actions yesterday. While I thank you for what you did yesterday, you did drag my son through the entire palace, the Emperor said. I don't see the point of this conversation yet, Your Majesty, Ning said. The emperor tried to speak more but just sighed. My family, especially the empress, wants you to get thrown out of the palace. She doesn't want a guard who can't respect her or the family, the emperor said. Ning looked at the emperor and asked, do you want to throw me out? Honestly, no, I would rather you stay by my side and protect me, the emperor said. I want you to be part of my shadow guard. That is the only way I can make you disappear from the palace without my wives knowing it. I see, Ning said. That's a fantastic idea, Your Majesty. The emperor was just about to get happy when, however, Ning continued. I will have to say no, I was only here to make sure your daughter and son-in-law were out of danger, and now that they are safe, I really don't see a reason to stick around. Huh? You're leaving? The emperor asked. Well, I was planning to stick around just a few weeks longer, but since I'm apparently being thrown out of the palace, it might be better for me to leave today, Ning said. But the threat on my children is still there. It's not gone entirely. Surely you can stick around a little longer, right? The emperor asked. Ah, you must mean the Shadow Pavilion. You won't need to worry about them anymore, Ning said. I don't need to worry about them? The emperor questioned. Yes, I have dealt with them already. You can relax now, Ning said. Did you do something to the assassins? Let's just say I gave the group a very stern talk and made them see why it was a bad idea to go after the prince and princesses of Xandria. They were really good at picking up suggestions and promised never to take any more job regarding the royal family of Xandria, Ning said. The emperor's eyes went wide in shock. He wondered what Ning could have possibly done to the assassins to force them to follow him. Anyway, since I have classes soon, I shall go meet up with the princess and prince consort and give them my goodbyes. See you later, Your Majesty. You're leaving, Brother Ning? Reaver asked in surprise. It was just yesterday they had gone to the feast, just yesterday Ning had taken him to the desert. It was just yesterday that Ning had helped them find out the truth about Lisa's eldest brother. I expected to be on the road constantly looking at the world, however, because you two were in trouble, I decided to stick around. Now that you have nothing to worry about, I will leave, Ning said. Where will you go? Lisa asked curiously. You know what? I don't know. I think I will stick around in the capital for a while more as I still have classes in the tower, but I might end up dropping out as well since I've learned what I wanted to, Ning said. I see, Reaver said. We would love if you would stay for much longer, but leaving is what you desire, then we won't stop you. Lisa walked forward and bowed towards Ning. Thank you for everything you've done for us so far, she said. Reaver followed her as well and bowed. Thank you, Brother Ning, he said. Ning felt a little emotional seeing that. All right, take care. I will come to meet you once in a while, although I don't know how many years later that will be. Also, you can contact me through those rings if anything ever comes up. Goodbye, Ning said and walked out. He didn't have anything more to do, so he went to Old Man Tim and let him know he was leaving. Then, he left the palace. Should I go back to the hotel? He wondered. He decided to think about it later as now was time for his classes. He walked over to the tower and went up the floor to his classroom. Inside, he found most of the students already there. Right, they stay in the dorms, so they can easily come to the class whenever they want, Ning thought. He looked to the side of the class and saw the seat where Rachel usually sat was empty. Ning internally chuckled and sat down on his bench. About 2 minutes before it was time for the classes to start, Rachel finally walked in. The moment she did, her body stiffened as she saw Ning in the class. Ning waved towards her. Rachel had planned to sit elsewhere, but seeing him wave, she felt that if she were to go sit anywhere else, she would be in danger of being targeted after class. So, while feeling afraid, while shivering, she went up to her original seat next to Ning and sat down. Good morning, Ning said with a smile. Rachel felt the skin on the back of her neck stand up when he spoke. Good morning. She tried to stop her fear show up in her voice, but she wasn't able to. I've been wanting to speak to you about something, Ning said. What is it? She asked. Well, exactly this, Ning said. Stop being scared so much. Do you think I'm here to hurt people? I'm not scared. Rachel tried to act strong, but her shakiness gave it away. So, you can steal people's ether by touching them, huh? Ning asked. What? And no, I don't know what you're talking about. I can do no such thing, she cried out. You don't have to lie. I know what you can do. Honestly, I'm a little jealous of what you can do. No wonder you got a scholarship with how great your ability with ether is, Ning said. Rachel got a little scared at having been figured out. She didn't expect Ning to know what her secret ability was, so she was frightened beyond belief. What are you going to do? Kill me and steal my skill? She asked. What? Ning looked at her with a weird face. Why would I kill you? Your skill can't be stolen either. You seem needlessly suspicious of me. You are a strong man acting like a student. Of course, you have something suspicious to do here, Rachel said. Just then, the teacher walked into the class. Ning turned around and stopped talking with Rachel to focus on the class, but the teacher didn't say anything. Instead, she looked at Ning. Ning, come with me, she said. What's going on? Ning thought. He stood up and walked to the front of the class before following the teacher Sherry out of the room. She walked in front of him, a full head shorter than him, and went to an elevator. After she entered, Ning followed into the elevator and waited for it to start moving. Before he knew it, the elevator started going upwards, and it showed no sign of stopping. After going up what felt like 20 floors, the elevator finally stopped, and Ning walked out of it. Follow me, Sherry said, and Ning nodded before following her to a room. There were a few people in the room, including one person he knew, the vice president of the tower. As soon as he walked into the room, the doors behind were shut as two bulky men, obviously trained in the ways of ether, stood guard. That doesn't seem suspicious at all, Ning thought. Ning looked around the room and saw at least 7 different people, not including the 2 guards behind him. The room was situated very high in the tower and was filled with different types of pictures, hung on the wall. One of which, he recognized to be of the goddess that the ether users seemed to believe in. May I ask why I have been brought here? Ning asked. The woman in her 50s wore a purple, scholarly robe like everyone in the room, but for some reason, she stood out the most in the group. So you must be Ning Ruigong, huh? The old woman asked. Yes, that is me, Ning said. And you are? I am Marilyn Champers. I am the president of the Xandria branch of the Ether Tower. The room had 9 people in total, not including Ning. 2 of them seemed to be guards, 4 of them were male teachers, and the rest were 3 female teachers. Of them, the principal started speaking to Ning. We brought you here to have a little talk, Marilyn, the president said to Ning. Ning looked around in suspicion and decided to act a little scared. 9 people of high ether rank. Forgive me if I have trouble believing you, President Marilyn, Ning said. He took a slightly defensive stance against them. Oh please, you don't have to worry at all. These people are here just to witness the conversation we will be having, the principal said. Very well, what are we talking about? Ning asked. Marilyn smiled and showed him the wooden chair in front of him, beckoning him to sit before they proceeded. Ning pulled back the chair from the table and sat on it, while the rest of the people, aside from the vice president who sat next to him and the president who sat opposite him, kept standing. First of all, is it true that you are an ether emperor? The president asked him directly. Ning was a little surprised that they asked the question. Do they have a connection to the palace? He wondered. Yes, I am, Ning said. May I know how you came to learn that? I think it's better if we keep that information to ourselves. The person did ask to be kept anonymous, the president said with a smile. The person? Is it Rachel? He wondered. Did that girl forget that I'm stronger than an emperor? So you were that strong when you came to join us, huh? The president said. You nearly fooled us into thinking you were a beginner. I don't know what you mean by that, President, Ning said. While I may have a high rank, I'm still a beginner in using ether. I still have a long way to go. While it may be understandable that you still have a long way to go, do you really think we will believe that you are a beginner? The president asked. Ning smiled at the president. I don't care what you believe. Do you think your belief will change the truth? He asked. So you insist that you are a beginner, huh? Well, I will believe that then, for now, the president said before bringing out something from her storage. Ning looked at what it was and recognized the old scroll. That was the same one he had given to the vice president to see how he would react at the time. The vice president had told him that he didn't know about absorption skills and that he would practice it on his own for a while. Ning had let him take it under the condition that he release its info to the world. Changing topic now, may I ask where you came to obtain this from? The president asked. That's a technique that's been passed down my family for a long time, Ning said. Do you happen to know the origin of this scroll? The president asked curiously. No, Ning said. I only know that it has been passed down our family for many generations. I see, the president said and brought out a thick book from her storage bag and slammed it on the table before her. The vice president came to me a few days ago, showing us that he got something amazing from you. When I went to check it, I realized that I had read about it before, the president said. Oh, you read about it before? Ning asked curiously. Yes, here, the president flipped the book and turned it to a page that read about an absorption skill that existed in the past that was stolen by someone, and since then it had been lost. Look at it, the marking is the same as well, the president said. I believe that this scroll was stolen by an ancestor of yours very many years ago and that in fact, it actually belongs to us. Ning was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that they actually forged a document to prove that the scroll actually belonged to them. He had actually never seen this much of a farce anywhere else. Is that really so? He acted surprised. Are you trying to say that my ancestors were thieves? No, of course not. The president quickly tried to keep the situation from exploding. We don't know how the scroll went on to get lost. It could be that your ancestor just happened to find it someday. What I am saying is that this scroll belongs to the tower, she said. How am I to know that this document hasn't been forged and that the scroll of yours you say to have been missing is a fake one? Ning asked. The president smiled. She seemed to have been ready for this line of questioning. That scroll is not the only piece of information about our tower that is recorded in this book. You can read everything about the history of the tower and judge for yourself if it is true or not, she said. So they prepared well for this, huh? Ning thought and picked up the book. He touched the page that held the information about the scroll. It certainly looked legit, but he knew it was fake. He looked back at the president once before turning back towards the book. I see, an invoker ether emperor. She must be quite talented to create something so intricate, he thought. He continued flipping the book to the earlier pages and realized that most of this information was actually true. The president was using truth to further legitimize her lies. Finally, Ning flipped it to the very first page of the book and read to himself what was written on it. When he did, his eyes suddenly went wide. It read, the Ether Tower was first established in the Sarian Empire, founded by the brother and sister duo, Famir and Mavenna. Famir? Mavenna? Those two kids started this tower? Ning felt a sense of pride when he realized what they had succeeded in doing. Ning was a little hesitant asking about their life when he got to Vilmore again, so the most he had asked was how long they had lived, which the system had told him were 359 and 455 years for the brother and sister respectively. Learning that they had lived so long, he had simply assumed that they had lived a good life. But, to learn that they actually started an organization that would go on to become the towering figure they were today. Thinking about all of this, Ning couldn't help but feel angry. These damn fuckers are trying to ruin what those siblings created, using it to further themselves when it was supposed to help the others, Ning thought. The siblings, especially Famir, knew hardship from a young age. Living in a small village, taking care of his only sister, he knew how hard the average person had to work to meet the week's end. Ning could guarantee that when the tower was created, neither of those siblings had any intention of keeping something like ether away from the normal folks. Yet, the people that came after them had twisted their beliefs, turning what they cherished into something that actively impoverishes the average human. Ning closed the book and placed it back on the table. You can see that the scroll initially did belong to us, however, we won't ask you to return it to us for free. In exchange for returning the scroll, we will give you a high-ranking position in the tower. That way yo. Enough! Ning shouted. He was truly angry right now. High-ranking position in the tower. What a joke. You have kept this farce going for long enough. The people in the room were startled at the sudden shout from Ning. What do you mean by farce, Mr. Ning? The president asked. Ning did not answer her and instead turned to his side to look at the vice president. How high in the organization do you have to be to learn about the absorption techniques? Ning asked. We don't know about absorptio. I know about your damn treaty with the nobles. I know you keep the techniques for yourself and give them to the nobles only. So just tell me how high do you have to be in the organization? Ning asked. The vice president was stunned. He hadn't expected a student to shout at him like that. Mr. Ning, please understand who you are speaking to. He's the vice president of the tower, Marilyn said from the side. And what is that role supposed to mean to me? Is it supposed to be something I should admire? Is it supposed to be something I respect? Ning asked. I admire none of you. You all lost my respect the moment you decided to throw the common man under the bus to further establish yourselves, Ning said. How dare you talk to us like that? The president said with a serious face. Not only did your ancestors steal from us, now you say such rude things in front of us? Ha! Steal? My ancestors stole what? I gave you a made-up scroll, and somehow you gave it a history of your own. You think that scroll that I would use to wipe my ass is of any worth at all? Ning asked. I could shit out 1,000 of those scrolls and you guys would all eat it like it's the most wonderful delicacy. Ning stood up from his chair. I will give you 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I want to hear the common folks down by the commercial zone, by the slums learn about the existence of the absorption techniques, and be handed a copy of the scroll each. If you do not do that, I will give them scrolls of my own, and believe me, they will be much better than that scroll. With that, I will establish an organization of myself, and topple yours down. The teachers and president that listened to Ning were in utter shock. They didn't expect the person they had brought in to sneakily join their tower would speak up in retaliation. Ha! Do you think your fake threats will work here? Do you expect yourself to be so good to create an organization that will topple ours? Just because you became a mere ether emperor, you must have let that go to your head if you seriously believe you have any power against us, the president said. You don't have to worry about that. That is my concern now, Ning said and walked away. The 2 buff men stood in front of him, not willing to budge. Ning stopped and looked at them. Move, he ordered. The 2 guards shuddered when they saw his eyes. Those were the eyes of a killer who would kill without hesitation. They moved to the side, and Ning opened the door to walk away. Just before he was gone, he turned around one last time and looked at the president. 2 weeks. Remember. I want everyone in the city to have a copy of that scroll, Ning said one last time before walking away. While Famir and Mavenna cared for this organization a lot, he knew that it would be better to destroy this organization now that it had gone in a direction they had never planned to. Ning walked into the elevator and pressed the button for the lowest floor. With what had just happened, he had practically expelled himself from the tower now, so there was no point in sticking around. Well, I hope the new students don't get indoctrinated into this system that benefits oneself at the expense of others, Ning thought. He was very much sure that his threat of toppling the tower would be seen as a joke by them, so to prove them wrong, he needed to think how he would go about it. He needed to prepare a lot of things. Ning left the tower and directly went to the commercial zone of the city. He has asked the system and found out that it would cost him quite a lot of energy if he wanted to create books for all of the people in the city. So, he was instead going to find a book printing company and have them work on it. He went to the biggest one in the city and found the head of the company. The head was an elderly man in his late 50s, and from the looks of it, he truly was in his late 50s, and not an overly old man that just happened to look like that thanks to ether. And unawakened, Ning thought with surprise, he will be easy to persuade then. Hello. How may I help you? The old man asked. I'm looking to print a small book that will be around 2 to 3 pages long. Or it could be a long scroll, Ning said. Oh, I don't know if that's printable here. We are mostly focused on large books with at least 100 pages, the old man said. Oh, but this will be worth it. It will be your biggest venture to date, Ning said. Oh, you say so, huh? The old man said, clearly not believing him. Yes, Ning said. This is what I wanted to have printed. Ning brought out a scroll that was about 3/4 of a meter long when fully unscrolled. The old man read the scroll for a while, not understanding what he was reading. It spoke of doing things in your body that shouldn't be possible as a human being. What is this? Some sort of prank? The old man asked. It's a way to increase your ether rank by employing that technique once you have ether, Ning said. The old man was surprised to hear what the thing was. No way such a thing exists. Are you trying to scam people? I must say, sir, I will help you in nothing that helps scam others, the old man said. It's not a scam, you can be sure about that. If you still have any hesitation, how about I let you practice with that technique for tonight and see if it works or not? I will come tomorrow to discuss our terms, Ning said and stood up. He understood that he couldn't rush things. Since he still had 2 weeks to spare before making sure the tower didn't do anything, he could take it slow. Ning then walked out of the room of the old man, but just before he left, he turned around. I almost forgot, he said. You are not an awakened ether user, right? Here, take this fruit. Ning tossed the fruit to the old man. You can eat the whole thing or just a slice of it. Either way, you will awaken with ether. You can give the rest to your family. Once that happens, you can try out that book, Ning said with a smile and left. The dumbfounded old man stayed back in his office, wondering what the hell had just happened. Ether awakening. A technique to increase ether? No way any of these exists, the old man thought. He looked at the fruit in his hands and started doubting that the fruit may also be poison. Give this fruit to my family? Is he trying to poison us all? The old man thought. Fortunately, his grandson was born with the ability to use ether, so he could see if the writing on that book was applicable or not, without making anyone eat the fruit. More customers arrived soon, and the old man forgot about it all. Ning made his way to the slum. He had expected everyone to get awakened as an ether user, aside from maybe the mothers who gave their piece of fruits to their children. Ning went around looking for such parents, as well as the stupid people who ignored his advice he had written on those pieces of paper and tried using the ether art without having much ether in them. Ning was sure he would find a lot of such people lying around the slum, paralyzed and unable to move. After all, that was one of the most common medical problems encountered on this planet. For those that didn't take their share of the fruit, Ning gave them some more pieces of them as he had brought an uncountable amount of them from the forest. As for those that were paralyzed, Ning first gave them a stern scolding, before giving them the pieces of fruits. He practically ordered everyone there to not use any ether arts until he himself told them it was safe to do so. Since it would be impossible to teach them all, he would wait for the book printing company's old man to agree to work with him. Ning went back to the city to find himself a hotel and settled in. He then started making plans on what he could do. Once the books were out, the tower officials would have a fire lit under their asses, so he would have to make sure to do all the publishing in a short period of time. He was also sure that the tower in other places would start looking out for him once he arrived there. The other countries have a worse situation for the non-ether awakened individual. I should get there soon too, Ning thought. Once he had made some plans for everything he was to do, he collapsed onto his bed and went to sleep. Ning woke up quite late in the morning since he had nothing to look forward to that day except for a meeting with the old man. So, after he was finally up, he freshened up and left. He arrived at the book printing location, and before he could even ask to see the old man himself came running up to him. "Young man, you are here," he said in a breathless voice. Ning smiled. "I see you tested it then," he asked, to which the old man nodded. "Good. Let us discuss the terms of the contract." "Mom, where are we going?" A little boy of 8 years old asked his mother, who was rushing somewhere while holding his hands. The speed was a little too fast for the little child, but the mother didn't seem to notice it and kept running while holding her son. "We need to hurry, my son," she said, "or we might be late." The mother rushed for nearly 5 minutes before she reached the location of the crowd she had heard so much about. The location was in the commercial zone, a little south of the city center. The crowd had formed on the roadway itself, blocking passage for both sides. People had already started claiming the road to be completely shut down for the next 2 or 3 days. There were thousands of people gathered at the location, with hundreds of people going in and out constantly. This was perhaps a bigger event than the feast the princess had put out 2 weeks ago. "Please do not hurry. There is enough for everyone," the staff members shouted out loud, but people didn't dare to care for it. What if they were wrong? What if it ended? They hurried. "You can only take 1 scroll per family, and that is all that you will need. Please do not take the opportunity for someone else to get it by buying more than one," the staff screamed, but they weren't sure if anyone would listen. The crowd was massive, but it converged into a single file, looked after by the other staff members to make sure there was nobody that tried to break the file. The file led to a paying booth where people would pay before getting their scroll. The mother who had just come waited in line for a good hour before it was her turn. The staff members had already mentioned the cost of the scroll, so as soon as she arrived, she gave 2 goals to the staff in the payment booth and went ahead. She was still in the line, but she quickly noticed the line separating into 2 files a little ahead. She reached the next booth, which the staff members hadn't told her about, and looked at the young man sitting on it. The young man looked at her and pointed to the left life. "Tell them your son doesn't need it," he told her. The woman was confused but didn't ask any questions. After a while, the line moved up and she saw a table with some of the staff on it. "Both of you?" the staff asked. "Sorry?" the woman asked. "What did the guy say?" the staff asked. My son doesn't need it," she said. "I see." The staff brought out a piece of fruit and handed it to the woman. "Eat it." The woman looked at the fruit with a slight bit of confusion and took a bite. When she did, she realized that the fruit was rather tasty, so she ate it all. She saw the line move up and walked forward with her son in tow. Finally, she saw it. The thing she had been waiting for. The scroll. The staff member handed her one and she took it. It was there, with her. She looked in awe as the staff member pushed her away for the other similarly curious people to get their hands on the scroll. When the scrolls were first revealed with a massive advertisement in the papers 2 days ago, nobody really came to them to buy them except for a few people that were truly desperate. After that, once those people spread the word, more people had come yesterday. After those people spread the words, today was the most they had seen in the entire lifetime of the publishing company's book sale. And more than likely, it would continue to grow for quite a while. Since it was a single scroll of paper printed, the group was looking at a lot of profit in their hands. Ning had planned to use the profit he would get to make extra copies for the people in the slums. He stayed in his booth, checking at the people, deciding whether to send them towards the left where there was a fruit or the right where it was only the scroll. He sighed a little while sending the people in either direction. The fruits aren't gonna last after today. I will have to go find more in the forest tonight, he thought. He needed a more foolproof idea that didn't depend on going to find the fruit every day. With how many people there were all over the world, it would be better to go find the ores rather than the fruits. I'll think about it later tonight, he thought and continued his work. Just as he was working, he saw a couple of people appear in front of him wearing the tower's robes. They didn't look like the top brass he saw 2 weeks ago, so he guessed they were here for the scroll too. He showed the right direction, but they didn't bother with him and instead went around him in both directions. Sigh, here we go again, he thought and stood up. Please wait for a few moments. It seems we might have a problem soon, Ning said and walked back towards the group that was handing out the scrolls. One of the men took out a scroll from his storage and unfolded it to reveal some writings on it. He then started speaking. What you are doing here is unlawful. Using a fake subtext of improving the public's ether rank by reading a scroll is untruthful and fraudulent. You are hereby advised to immediately stop this and hand over all of your remaining scrolls. The old man that was looking over the entire thing started getting scared. He walked in front of them to speak when suddenly Ning stepped forward. I am the one selling these scrolls. Are you trying to call me a fraud? Ning asked. There were 5 men from the tower, 2 on the table with the fruit, and 3 on the table without it. The leader, the one on the table with the fruit, had a long face with a pointed chin. He looked at Ning with his slimy face and put on a serious face. Ning was sure he had been instructed how to act, so he was waiting for the man to answer his question. Yes, the man said. You are undoubtedly a fraud. You are giving the poor citizens false hope with your lies. People, don't fall for this trap. You are being lied to. There is no such technique as this that can improve your ether rank. The crowd started whispering amongst themselves. Seeing the most trusted source in their city calling the scroll fake, they started to believe them. I suggest you stop this unfaithful business right now and hand over the scrolls to us, or we will be forced to shut down this production house, the man shouted. Are you saying that the people who used our scrolls yesterday and the day before that are frauds too? Ning asked. They are, without any shadow of a doubt, actors that you paid to rile up the crowd into buying your fake scrolls, the leader said. The crowd was getting increasingly sure that they had fallen into some sort of trap and were now waiting to see retribution dropped on the schemer's head. If you say I'm a fraud by selling these scrolls, then you can surely tell me what I have to gain from these, right? Ning asked. Of course. You are trying to earn a quick buck and disappear, the leader said confidently. Is that so? Ning asked with a smile. The leader saw his smile and got a little worried. How about this then? If you say I'm doing this all for money, then I will give it to them for free. I will even return the money back to the people who already paid. Can I give them the scroll now? Ning asked. The leader panicked a little. He hadn't thought Ning would go in this direction with his question. No, we cannot let this lie spread forward. We have direct orders from the tower to stop your unlawful activity, the man said. Under what authority? Ning asked. I'm just selling a scroll here. Leave quietly now and let me do my thing. Under what authority? The authority of the tower, you bastard. It doesn't look like you will stop it willingly. Men, destroy all of the scrolls, the leader shouted. Any one of you so as touches the scroll will find a bone sticking out of your arm, Ning said in the voice that sent chills down the spine of everyone looking. Saint, stop listening to him, and just do it, the leader shouted. The men immediately took the scrolls that were on the table and started burning them. You've done it now, Ning said softly. Suddenly, all of the men felt their bodies unable to move. Even the invokers who were supposed to have some resistance against bodily enchantments were forcefully being controlled. They floated in the air and moved forward violently to crash with each other in the air before dropping to the ground before Ning. Ning grabbed the leader's arm and said, "I told you I would break your arm." With that, he stepped on it. "Ah!" the leader shouted. As promised, his arm was bent in the wrong direction, with blood gushing out of it and a sharp bone sticking out as well. Listening to the leader's cries, the rest of the men got frightened. They tried to run away, but they couldn't move. Ning pulled their arms forward and started crushing their hands. Unlike the leader, he only broke their palm bones. Still, the bones were sticking out of them, and they were bleeding. "Now get the hell out of my sight," he told them. The men slowly stood up, red from the pain, and glared at Ning. However, the fear in their hearts stopped them from doing anything stupid. They walked away to leave, but just then Ning stopped them again. "Remind your superiors, they have one more day. If they don't do what I told them to do, they will have to start looking for a new job soon," Ning told the men with a smile. The men nodded and quickly walked away. The crowd stared in awe and fear, so did the staff members that were selling the scrolls. "Ah, sorry about the delay," Ning said nonchalantly and went back to his seat to redirect the group again. A lot of the people in the crowd hesitated, but after seeing Ning's strength, a few of them started to doubt if the tower was correct in this situation. They could already see them trying to use their powers to stop this sale, so it only went onward to legitimize the current operations in their eyes. Most of the people still believed the tower, but on the small chance that the scroll did work, they had to get it. So, within minutes, the line started moving again. People were sold the scrolls and quite a few of the people even got to eat the fruit. For the next few hours, they peacefully sold the scroll. However, that changed when the crowd saw a group of people flying through the air on what looked like a carriage from far away. The carriage landed on the road next to the crowd and they watched a few figures in purple robes walk out of it. Ning looked at them as well and smiled when he saw the group. Finally, the big players were here to stop his work. "Welcome, President Marilyn, Vice President, and, I don't know who you lot are, but welcome," Ning said to the group of 6 that had walked out of the carriage. The group directly walked up to Ning, but Ning suddenly put up a hand to stop them. "I know you are people with a lot of fame, but you cannot cut in line like this. Please go back to the end of the crowd. You will get your scroll when the time comes." The few people next to Marilyn tried to get physical after hearing Ning's words, but Marilyn stopped them. She turned around and looked at the man whose turn was supposed to be next and asked, "Do you mind if we slip in here?" The man shook his head before he even understood what the words coming out of Marilyn's mouth meant. "Thank you," Marilyn said and then turned to the other people behind the man and asked, "Do any one of you have any problems with us slipping into this line?" Not a single voice of opposition could be heard from the people behind her. Ning smirked in response, seeing how well respected these actual frauds were. "Very well. Since there are 6 of you, give me 12 goals and go that way," Ning said while keeping the smirk on his face. "We are not here to buy your scroll," Marilyn said. "Oh my, is that true? I'm so surprised," Ning said. He crossed his fingers behind his head and put his feet on the table before slanting back on the chair. "So, how may I help you with? And please don't give me the, 'you are a fraud,' bullshit. I will beat the crap out of you guys as well," Ning threatened them. The vice president got angry. He couldn't believe that this was the same person he gave a scholarship to just a few weeks ago. "No, we are not here for that," Marilyn said. "We are here to make a truce with you." "Oh," Ning said as his right eyebrow moved up. "Go on, I'm listening." Marilyn looked around and in a quiet voice said, "What will it take you to stop this nonsense?" "Whatever do you mean by this nonsense?" Ning spoke in as loud a voice as he could. "Talk normally so everyone can hear you." Marilyn's eyes narrowed in slight anger. "Fine," she said. "What will it take you to stop this farce?" Ning smiled again. "How could you not know that after I have told you so many times, share your techniques with the common masses and I will stop doing this, for Xandria only. I will still go to the other country and make them all do the same thing." Marilyn didn't speak, however, Ning could feel her start to tap into her ether. "Be careful. You don't want to do something so stupid in front of the crowd, right?" Ning said, his smile the most irritating thing on him. "All right. What do you want out of this then? Money? Power? Status?" she asked. "I just want what my disciples created to go back to being what they envisioned it to be. If that can't happen, it's better to not have it at all," Ning said. "What? Disciple? What are you talking about?" Marilyn asked. "Forget about it," Ning said. "Tell me, What do you have to offer me, aside from threats, to stop me from selling these techniques? Marilyn thought for a moment and tried to come up with something he could want, but she couldn't think of anything at the moment. That was when the vice president walked forward and said, I have been meaning to retire for a few years now. You can have my position if you want. Sorry to break it to you, but a mere vice president's position is of no interest to me, Ning said. Even the president's position is the bare minimum, since that way I can at least start the reformation process of the tower in Xandria. What I really want to do is own the ether tower itself. That way I can put it back onto its correct track and reclaim the honor my disciples left it with, Ning said. Huh? Own the ether tower? You are really looking down on the tower, aren't you? Just because the tower is an academic place, you forgot that it is also the strongest military force in the entire world, Marilyn said. I know, Ning said. But there is not a single thing your military can do if you have to fight the whole world itself, can it? The scrolls have already spread, thousands of them. Are you sure you can track them down and destroy every single one of them? What about the people that made more copies of it in secret? What about the ones that already learned it? Knowledge of it is sure to spread to the other cities and soon the other nations too. Are you sure your strongest army can stop it? Ning asked. Suddenly, he felt ether move towards him. He could probably stop the ether from entering his body with his own ether, but he didn't. Something then grew in his mind. He didn't feel any pain, or rather he felt nothing at all. However, he could tell that there were parts of his body that were losing function. If you won't accept our suggestion, then you can try and fight us. You will see how sorely you have underestimated the tower to make an enemy out of it, Marilyn said and turned around to leave. There was nothing further to talk about for her since the person could no longer talk. Have a good day then, Miss Marilyn. I pray that you have a good time trying to explain to people why such techniques had been hidden all this time, he said. What? She looked around in shock. How is he speaking right now, she thought. Is something wrong? Ning asked when she turned around. And nothing, she said. Good then, Ning said. Just then, he gagged a little and spit out a small sharp metal piece out of his mouth. He tossed the metal onto Marilyn, who moved away and let it drop on the floor. She could hear some sizzling on the ground as the metal melted onto the ground itself. Also, Ning continued as his face suddenly turned cold, giving the illusion of temperature dropping around them. Pull such a trick again and I will make you understand what they mean by the sweet release of death. After that day, no one from the tower came back to stop Ning directly. Ning was free to do whatever he wanted, and that made Ning suspicious. What are they planning? He wondered. However, they never did anything. They didn't even send the nobles to force him to stop. So, Ning continued sharing his scrolls and fruits all over the city. Once he thought everyone got what they needed, he left. He went to the other cities around the country and started doing the same things there as well. He got a local publishing company to start publishing and selling the scrolls as well as the fruits to the locals. Damn it, Ning thought. The forest is nearly not large enough to have enough fruits for this place. By the time he reached the fourth city on his journey, Ning was starting to feel troubled with the fruits. There wasn't an endless supply, and he would have to find one if he wanted to continue with this. I should go find some ether ores, he thought. There was one place in his mind that held ether ores, but he wasn't sure just how many there were left. So, one night, he disappeared and arrived at the southern pole of the continent, the place that held ruins of the peak of afterlife. Ning saw kids playing on the ground in the dim light of the sun far off on the horizon. Very few houses were in the city nearby and they were lit up brightly with smokes coming out of the chimneys. The desert-like landscape with a dry climate that had been previously what Ning expected, had now turned into a cold, winter land with snow all around him. Whoa, he thought. This place has changed quite a bit. Is the climate no longer just contained into the peak? Thinking of that, Ning looked towards where the peak used to exist. Now, it was nothing but a hill now. Ning flew towards the destroyed mountain and couldn't believe that he was responsible for this. He felt a bit sad remembering so many people had died from the earthquake and debris. It seems the natural seal around this place has also been destroyed, he thought. He shook his head and went to the mountain to check if there were any ores left in the place. The peak no longer has aurora in it, with chi no longer being expelled through the opening. So, Ning could easily stand on top of it and watch inside. Did it turn into a volcano? He wondered when he saw the crusted land in the middle of the crater as well as the rather massive land around it that could only have been formed from a volcanic eruption. Sigh, that place must be buried now. How am I going to get in there? Ning wondered. Ning could only think of teleporting into the cave that was at the foot of the mountain, and so he did. However, where he teleported to was actually on top of the mountain. I can't go in, he thought. That means there was no free space for his body to teleport in there. Ning scratched his head in confusion. System, does this place even have ether ores? He asked. There are some below you, Ning thought for a moment. He did gain one idea, but he wasn't sure how useful it would be. Damn, I hope it's solid as a rock and not clumpy like dirt, he thought, and suddenly changed bodies. His body fell onto the ground, and Ning quickly took it back. This is quite large, he thought. Wait, what happens if I teleport out now? Ning decided to try it out. He suddenly teleported and reappeared on top of the crater once more. As the rock fell, he changed his body back to the human body. Phew, that worked, he thought, and went back to see the massive hole he had created. How deep are the ores? Ning asked. 12 meters deep. I should be able to collect them then, he thought, and went back to doing the same things over and over again until there were no rocks around that area, and the purple ether ores were finally visible. Nice, he thought, and started scraping out the ether ores with his own hands that were enhanced. As he had expected, he couldn't just use his ether arts on the objects that had heavily concentrated amounts of ether. After a few hours, Ning was done gathering all the ether ores that were surprisingly still there. He decided to leave, but then he remembered that the area around the peak was a place that didn't belong to any countries. There should be people here that would love to get some ether arts as well, he thought, and went over to the people to give them a piece of ore as well as the scroll with the information. It didn't take very long to pass them all up. He didn't stay long enough to see if they believed him or not, but he just needed a single person to do what he said, and from word of mouth alone the whole city would start using the technique. Ning reappeared back in Xandria and continued with his task. Now, he had enough resources to awaken at least 2 more whole countries. He went through many cities in Xandria, giving people hope and power. He was soon very famous in all the cities, and most cities had people waiting for him to visit. By now, they had started calling him a savior and hope of humanity. They asked him who he was, but Ning never gave away his name to them, and instead simply told them he was someone working against the ether tower to loosen their clutch on the normal folks. He was soon given a name by the people, since he went around giving people the ability to use ether, similar to what the legends said the goddess did. They started calling him the Apostle of Alexis. In the Sarian Empire, headquarters of the ether tower, a woman rushed through the hallway and entered the elevator. She hurriedly hit the highest button inside the elevator and clutched the piece of paper she was holding to her chest. After a minute or so, when the elevator door opened, the woman once more rushed to a grandiose door and knocked on it. The door opened on its own and the woman walked in. "Your Highness, we have a situation," she said. An old, decrepit man with long white hair and beard sat cross-legged on the floor instead of the table. When he heard the woman, he slowly opened his eyes. "Does this situation have anything to do with the Apostle of Alexis?" he asked. "Yes, Your Highness. From our report, he is on his way to the Ordained Empire. If we don't stop him, he will spread." "That's all right," the man said, interrupting the woman. "I will take care of it. Tell the others to not worry about it." The woman lost all sense of panic and felt incredibly relieved. "Will you?" "Thank you, Your Highness." The woman left the room and the door shut behind her. The old man stayed in the room for a while and contemplated what he had to do. So, he stood up and walked to the desk, and picked up the phone. He hit a number he had remembered and waited for the other person to answer. "Your Highness, is it you?" A woman spoke in a raspy voice on the other side. "Yigri, I need you to prepare something," he said. "What is it, Your Highness?" the woman asked. "I need your best work," the man said, and waited for the woman to answer. He didn't get an answer for half a minute before the woman replied. "I will need at least 2 weeks, Your Highness. Maybe even more," she said. "I am fine with that. Let me know when you are done with it," the old man said, and ended the call. He then went back to sitting cross-legged and started his absorption technique once more. Ning arrived in a city called Harno in the Ordained Empire. He walked out of the train and looked around the station. The place wasn't any different from back in Xandria. Even the ethnicities looked quite similar. There may have been a few differences here and there, but overall, they looked the same as the Xandrians. Ning was about to walk out of the station when he was stopped. "Are you new?" a pair of guards asked at the pathway outside. Ning noticed that it wasn't just him that was being stopped, but others as well. "Yes, I'm new," Ning replied. Perform an ether art, the guards said. I said, perform an ether art. Are you deaf? The guard was a bit rude. What the hell? Ning thought before creating a tongue of flame that lasted for a second at most. Wear this on your arm at all times, the guards said as they handed him a red armband. This is? Ning asked. To separate you from the dud. If you are found not wearing the band when you are in the city, you will be penalized, the guard said. Ning looked and saw that the guard himself too had a red armband. Ning nodded and walked on after wearing the armband. He saw other groups of people wearing similar bands, and a few of them wore white ones. Is that the band for the duds? Ning wondered. There were almost as many duds as ether users in the city from what Ning could tell. Ning walked out of the city and thought of what he needed to do next. As always, his first choice was to find a publishing company to print his scrolls. After that, he just needed to find a hotel for himself. Ning looked around, trying to find a ride when he heard someone shouting. You think I will pay 10 sils for your shitty carriage? Someone was shouting at a carriage driver. Sir, that is the price of the carriage ride for where you want to go, the driver said. You dare talk back to me? The man suddenly slapped the driver in front of the whole crowd. What the hell? Ning said softly. He expected the driver to hit back, but for some reason, he simply stood there with his head low while holding his cheeks. Ning looked at the crowd and not a single person walked up to do anything. Even the 2 children and woman next to the man looked at the situation with no hint of shame in their eyes. 2 sils, that is all I will be paying you, the man told him. Sir, 2 sils is just not enough. I have a family to loo. The man slapped the driver again. You dare talk back to me? Have you forgotten your place? He screamed at the poor driver again. Ning couldn't keep watching this, so he walked forward. Brother, how much will it cost me to go to the Sweepy Street? Ning asked. Who the hell are you? The man asked. I already chose this carriage, go away. But it doesn't look like you are going to use it. If you are, why don't you pay his 10 sils price? Ning asked. Huh, are you empathizing with a dud? You are one stupid idiot, the man said. You think he's different just because he has a white band on his arm? Ning asked. Without waiting for an answer, he snapped his finger and the man's red band slipped out of his hand and into Ning's own. He then turned around to the driver and gave it to him. Wear this, he said. I can. You can after you eat this, Ning said as he brought out an ether ore. The driver's eyes opened wide in shock. He may be a nobody, but he knew what an ether ore was. Who are you? The driver asked. I am the apostle of Alexis, and I have come to this city to turn every single dud into an ether user. By the time I leave, I will make sure there is not a single person here that can look down on you all. Ning lived in a small house close to the western border of the city. This was not a house that he owned or one that he rented. It was a house owned by a dud couple that were going to be out of a few weeks, so they had decided to give him the house. After all, he didn't have a proper place to stay after the hotels decided to kick him out all because he was the apostle of Alexis. These people that were born with ether couldn't stand seeing someone of slower status rising to the same ranks as them. The differences between a normal man and a dud was slowly disappearing, and they didn't like that. Ning could only sigh when he thought that. The prejudice and hatred the ether users had against the duds was so deep-rooted that they couldn't see the rise of the duds being anything other than bad. Ning woke up in the morning and pulled out something to eat. Once done, he walked out of the house and shook his head. Once more they had trashed the place. There were trash all around the front yard, not a single place for him to set up his shop at. There were also writings on the wall that called him words like traitor and waste of ether. Am I going to have to not only help the duds get ether, but also go around teaching why there should have been no distinctions in the first place? Ning wondered. That was too much work. He would rather not have to do that. He sighed as he looked at the outer wall with the large texts. I better clear this all before the payo. Suddenly Ning's hand moved behind him and caught a stone right as it was about to hit his head. He pulled the stone front and saw that it was about the size of a chicken egg. He turned around and saw that there were a bunch of young men there glaring at him. Ning looked at the young kid at the center, about 15 or 16 years old. Did you throw this stone at me? Ning asked. Patui. The kid spit next to him. I was only throwing stone at a pile of shit in the middle of a garbage. Didn't know there was a human here. The bunch of kids next to him started laughing as if he had said the funniest joke they had ever heard. Ning looked around him at the pile of garbage and smiled. Did your parents ever tell you that why you should never throw a stone at a pile of shit? He asked. Why? The kids asked with a still smiling face. Because if you throw a stone at shit, it usually splashes back on you. Suddenly a bunch of stones flew off from near Ning, accurately hitting the shin of all the legs that those kids had. Not a single bone was broken, but the kids fell onto the ground and started crying out in pain. People started to gather around his house and saw the bunch of kids on the ground. They didn't sympathize with the kids. They were known troublemakers that ran around the city causing problems to the duds. Their parents had high status in the city, so the duds couldn't even do anything against them. Right now, all they thought in their heart was whatever happened here, the kids deserved it. Ning walked up to the kid and pulled up the leader of the group and asked him, "Are you responsible for this?" "Fuck off. Do you think I will answer you?" he shouted. "You will if you don't want me to break those legs," Ning said as he grabbed at the same part he had hit the stone at and started putting incredible pressure at it. "Ah!" The kid started screaming in pain. "Answer me quickly or your bones will break in half." "No." The kid cried. "Very well." Ning put more pressure on it, getting the bone to the point of snapping. "Wait, wait, wait, it was us. We did it," the kid shouted. Ning let go. The kid immediately started massaging to red, almost purple spot on his leg where Ning had been putting pressure. "You did it?" Ning asked. The other kids were fully terrified seeing what the main kid was going through. "Yes, we did it," the kid said. "Under whose order?" Ning asked. No one. We just heard the adults talking about you and came to do what we did," the kid said. "All right. You have 1 hour to fix this house the way it was before. If not, I will break all of your legs for sure this time," Ning scared them. Yes." The kids nodded quickly and stood up to go clear the garbage and the writing on the wall. Ning didn't care how they would do it, he only cared that they did. He cleared a bit of trash in one area, and set up his table there. People started gathering in a line in front of him. There were people who hadn't yet gotten their share of ores and scrolls to become an ether user yet. So he spent the next few hours waiting for people to come. From what he knew, there shouldn't have been that many people left yet, and in a matter of days he should be able to leave this place. The line was disrupted as a bunch of buff adults walked up to Ning with a bunch of sticks and metal rods. They slammed his table the moment they arrived, smashing it into bits. "What are you doing?" Ning asked. They didn't answer and instead surrounded him and grabbed him by his arms, pulling him up. A man appeared from the crowd with an almost obese body and a fancy-looking suit. "Who are you?" Ning asked. "I am the mayor of this city, and I have come here to punish you for the chaos you have brought into my city." "The mayor?" Ning looked at him with a curious face. "So you are Vandal Might, huh?" "Yes, I am Vandal." The mayor looked behind Ning and saw the bunch of kids who were busy scrubbing away the words from the wall. "You kids, what are you doing here?" the mayor asked. "Uncle Vandal." The main kid seemed to know him closely. This man hurt us and forced us to work for him." "You." The mayor got angry. "Not only are you causing chaos in my city, but you are also beating up the youths of my city as well. You really need to be taught a lesson. Calling yourself the apostle of a goddess that doesn't exist, disrupting the society, you are worse than a criminal scum," the mayor said. "Can you stop talking please, and do whatever you came here to do?" Ning asked. "Because unlike you, I have a responsibility to improve this city." The mayor snapped. "Beat him," he ordered. The men at the side started striking at Ning's stomach with the metal rods and wooden sticks. Some hit him on the legs, some hit him on the chest, and some hit him on the shoulders. Some even struck him on the head, clearly with the intention to kill. He was struck from all sides for at least a whole minute before the mayor asked his goons to stop attacking. The crowd gasped all around them, and some even tried to come to the front to save Ning, but the mayor had people behind him guarding him. "Is he dead?" the mayor asked. "Sir, he's not even bleeding," one of the men said. "What? How can it be?" The mayor got surprised. Ning straightened his back and cracked his neck. He turned his head around to the back and looked at the kids who had fear and shock in their eyes from seeing a person being nearly beaten to death. "You kids can leave now, run off," Ning said. The kids looked at each other in confusion and didn't know what to do. "I told you to run away, or do you want to keep scrubbing this place?" he asked. The kids nodded and walked away. Ning then turned to the crowd and spoke, "Take your kids away, they shouldn't see this." The many parents in the crowd immediately searched for their kids and started taking them away. They believed he was talking about himself being killed and even held a tear in their eyes for him. Only if they knew what he was thinking. Ning finally turned to the mayor. "You really came here planning to kill me, huh?" he asked. "You bast. Who was the one that hit me first?" "It was you, right?" Ning asked one of the burly men standing to his right. "So what if it was me?" the man asked. The man holding Ning's right arm suddenly felt an incredible force throwing him upwards. Everyone looked at the man being thrown high in the air, and at the same time, Ning used the free right hand to directly grab the throat of the man who had just spoken. "You have one last time to take yourself and your children away from here," Ning said. The crowd finally understood what was going to happen. Some left, but most stayed behind to watch. They wanted to see what was going to happen. Ning looked back to the man and asked, "So what if it was you, right?" He could see the fear rise up in the man's eyes. The man suddenly struck the wooden bat right on Ning's head again, but as he did, his hands limped and there was no force at all on the attack. Ning let go of his hands and watched the man fall to the ground with a crushed neck. Without a shadow of a doubt, the man was dead. The catharsis of seeing people that had always looked down on them and treated them poorly getting hurt would feel incredible was what the people that stayed behind had thought. However, seeing a person die so easily, even if they had hated them, made them feel a little sick. Ning turned to the mayor again and showed a devilish smile. "You see, I have a little rule for myself. Well, it's less of a rule and more of a restriction. I never kill people that have no desire to hurt me or the others." His voice turned cold. "You guys are not it." Suddenly a spear formed right into his hands. The men couldn't understand if he had created it, or taken it out of his storage bag. Either way, it was too fast. Ning swung the spear towards his left arm, cutting the hands of the man that held him. With the same motion, he stabbed upwards and pierced the man that was falling down in the shoulder. He swung the back of the spear and hit another man in the face, breaking his jaw and cheekbones. He then stopped a rod swing from another man in front of him and cut the rod in two before stabbing him through the throat. Ning remembered the people who hit him with full intention to kill and he only killed them. As for the others, he beat them until they wished they were dead. The mayor fell down on the ground as he watched the big men he had brought to kill this so-called apostle get beaten and die at his hands. He wanted to run away, but his legs weren't working. When Ning was done, half the men were dead, and half were unconscious after going into shock. Ning walked up to the mayor and stabbed him through the calves, making him scream at the top of his lungs. "Did you think that just because I was single, I was an easy target for you?" Ning asked. "Sorry to say, but you poked the wrong beast today." Ning pulled the spear out of the mayor's calves and pierced it through his skull. Ning finally looked up and around him at the terrified faces of the crowd. "It seems I cannot stay in this place any longer." Ning had already left Harno City 2 weeks ago. He was starting to feel regretful about killing the mayor and the few other people. He wasn't regretful because he killed, but rather because he was now considered a criminal, and this greatly diminished his influence as someone that was trying to do good. Tisk. I should remember this isn't Kumiya. It's way more lawful, Ning thought to himself as he waited for people to him. The Empire had branded him a criminal, and he was finding it hard to do his apostle work without people figuring out who he was. He needed to think of ways to do that. One way was to give the technique to the publishing companies and have them do the work instead of him having to do it all. That was likely the fastest way to go about it. After all, his primary focus for doing all of this was to bring the techniques to the normal folks that the tower was trying to suppress. The problem he faced now were the duds. He needed to give them something that wasn't simply ether ores so that he could keep hiding. He also needed something that could be mass manufactured like the scrolls. He would have to think about those later. Ning took out a bunch of scrolls and laid them out in front of him on the bed in his hotel room. How many is this? He thought and started counting. He had about 300 more scrolls. Alright. Let's do this. System, teleport these 300 scrolls to every publishing company in all of this world, Ning said. There are more than 300 publishing companies. Then just do it for the top 300 of those, Ning said. In his thoughts, even if just 3 of the 300 started publishing those scrolls, it would cause a big enough wave that the other 297 would soon join in on the action. Also, write courtesy of the Apostle of Alexis's on the back of all of these scrolls before you do that, okay? Confirmed. The scrolls vanished at a moment's notice and were no more on the bed. Now, he would just have to wait and watch the tower's ass be lit of fire. That makes me wonder. Aren't they supposed to be trying to stop me? It can't be that they gave up just because of what happened with Marilyn in Xandria, right? he thought. Just then, he felt the movement of air around him. His shirt flapped in the moving wind as his hair drifted to the side as well. Not only the wind, but all the objects in the room were also slowly moving towards a certain point in his room. Ning looked to his right and saw something black appear in front of him. It was a very tiny black spot in midair, but somehow the image of everything around it seemed warped. The image warping with the pulling of objects around him gave Ning an idea of what that thing was. It was a point in space that had a very strong gravitational pull. Just as Ning was wondering what unnatural phenomenon was happening, the gravitational pull in front of him stopped, the winds and objects around him stopped moving, and in front of him, a man appeared. It was an old man with long white hair, a white beard, and a very weak-looking build. He wore a dark purple robe and held a rather amicable smile on his face. "Are you the apostle of Alexis?" the man asked. Ning looked at him in absolute shock. This man in front of him, he had just teleported there. Aside from himself and Joachim with his system, Ning had never seen another man teleport. However, he was sure that this man didn't use any system, instead, he used normal enchantment. Ning knew about the possibility of teleportation using enchantment. He didn't know how it could be done, only that it could be. To think he would see someone teleport one day using only the energy of the planet, this was a dangerous man. Ning could tell that this man was strong, far stronger than he could hope to become in a short period of time. The man looked at Ning for a while and said, "Based on your description of having a young face and quite a strong ether rank, I can assume that you really are the apostle of Alexis." Ning looked at the man and used his ether analysis on him to check his rank. Suddenly, a sharp pain flared in his mind, making him stop. He had only seen the person's rank and it had caused him mental pain. He had just now spent most of his mental energy trying to view this person's ether rank. This was dangerous. He was not a man Ning could fight. "I am Perry Thatcher, the current lord of the Ether Tower," he introduced himself. He then brought out a small glass bottle. Ning didn't know what it was, but it looked dangerous. At the same time, he felt something in his stomach. Ning looked at the bottle in the man's hand and for some reason felt his stomach where the bottle was. "Shit. He's squeezing space again," Ning thought and teleported out of the room. The Lord of the Ether Tower remained in the room with a look of shock on his face. He looked around, but he couldn't see where Ning was at all. Did he teleport without using ether? The Lord wondered. He wanted to learn how one could do that as well. However, he sighed as he would likely never learn it now. He weighed the bottle in his hands, and as expected, the contents of it had already been moved over to a different location. The location being the stomach of the apostle. Ning reappeared on top of the ruins of afterlife. That was the only place he could think of in the fraction of a second he had to leave. He was about to take a deep breath of relief when suddenly, something started burning from deep within him. Ning felt the burning in his stomach, and worse, it was slowly moving onto other parts of his body. He did not feel any pain, so the burning was the only thing he could feel. If he had pain receptors, he was sure he would be on the ground, writhing with pain. Suddenly he felt something happening. A rush of liquid came up his esophagus, and he vomited it out. Ning looked at it and saw a mixture of blood, food, and something that was destroying them both. "Shit, have I been poisoned?" he wondered. Just as he thought that he felt his right knee buckled, he dropped to the ground and smacked his head on the ground. "What the hell?" he thought and looked at his knees, only to find it fully rotten, with bones sticking out of it. His skin and muscle writhed over his bones, trying to fix themselves, but the toxin his body had kept destroying them. "System, what's going on?" he asked. "You have a powerful toxin in your body that is destroying your body from the inside. And my regeneration can't keep up?" Ning asked in surprise as he felt the other parts of his body start to tear themselves up as well. "Yes. The toxin is destroying your cells and using them to produce more toxins that continue destroying your cells. At this rate, the toxin will overtake your body until nothing remains." "What the hell? Will my body not regenerate?" Ning asked. "It will, but the toxin will destroy it again, damn it. What the hell did that guy do?" Ning thought back to the Lord of the Tower's glass bottle. That was what likely held this toxin. To think such a powerful toxin existed, he thought. "System, can you remove it please?" he asked. "It will cost you 52 trillion energy, are you sure?" "Wait, what the hell?" Ning asked. "That's half of what I have right now. Why the hell is it so expensive to fix it?" "The toxin is really powerful, and removing it from your body not only requires the toxin to be removed, but also part of your body which has been eaten away by the toxin. It is your body part that makes this task so expensive. If the toxin alone were to be removed, it would only cost you 1.5 trillion energy. Damn it! Ning cried out. He couldn't do that. He wasn't going to spend half of his energy on his body. Is there any other way? Ning asked. There is a cure you can prepare using the ingredients found in this world. Oh, that makes it easy. Give me the list of ingredients and where I can find them, Ning said. The system did what it was told and gave him a bunch of information. Ning looked through all of that information, but there was something missing. Hey, why does this scarlet blood lily have no location assigned to it? Ning asked. Less than there isn't one mature enough for use in this world yet. Greater than. Fuck. When is the soonest that one will mature? Ning asked. 5 years. Oh, that's not bad. I can wait for 5 years, Ning thought. Without wasting any more time, Ning brought out his spear from his storage and switched bodies with it before taking his body into his storage. With the time stopped in the storage, the toxin couldn't keep eating away at it like it was just now. 5 years, huh? I guess I will have to go back to the same routine as I did for hundreds of years before this, Ning thought. Although, before that, let's go gather all the ingredients I will need, Ning said. After that, Ning teleported around the world, which mostly just led him to the forest that separated the continent. Within it, he found many of the ingredients he needed, all except for the scarlet blood lily. He found multiple of them as well, but not a single one mature enough to be useful. When he asked why there were none of such flowers available even though it wasn't the rarest flower in the forest, the system had told him that it had to do with the lifetime of the flower. After the flower blossomed, which was it maturing, the flower would only stay matured for about 5 days worth of time. If not picked within that time period, the flower would then disappear and in its place, it would form a fruit. Unfortunately, Ning didn't need the fruit. So I just have to pick it up when it matures, huh? That's simple. Let me know when that happens, okay system? Ning asked. Confirmed. Ning decided to stay in the forest. He was still in his spear, so he told the system. I will go sleep. Wake me up when my energy cap has reset or if I am moved from this place, Ning said. Understood. Ning slowly felt his consciousness leave him. As soon as it was gone, he felt it coming back. Ning heard some rattling sounds from around him as well as an up and down motion on his body. He also heard sounds of horses neighing. A carriage? Ning thought confusedly. He looked around him and saw that he was in fact in the back of an ancient-looking carriage. He was currently being held by a woman to her left who looked to the back of the carriage. The woman, if described as anything, was beautiful. That was all Ning could think at the moment. Long slender arms that were barely hidden by the see-through fabric of hers. An oval face of fair complexion with skin so smooth that Ning thought it was a statue for a moment. The woman blinked, her long eyelashes moving, further accentuating the beautiful, dark purple eyes of hers. Her long flowing dark auburn hair fell down to her chest, not a single hair gone stray from it. Along with the rest of her body, Ning really thought she was the most beautiful person he had ever seen in his life. And that was weird. Whatever he was feeling was definitely weird. He had never felt this much attraction towards a person in all of his life, even when his emotions were amplified. It was as if the woman sitting in front of him was supposed to be the epitome of what human beauty could be. No, something is wrong. I can't stay here, Ning thought. He wasn't sure how he was here in the first place, so he decided to leave back to the forest near the scarlet blood lilies. With a thought, he disappeared from the location. His scenery changed, but not all that much. All he had somehow managed to do was go from being on the left side of the woman to being on the right side. What the hell is going? Just then, he looked at the woman. She was looking back at him and smiling towards him as well. You can stop trying to leave me, she said. I have been watching you for a while now. I know all of your tricks. Ning felt scared and weirdly attracted to her smile at the same time. Did you really think that I would let you go after you go around claiming to be my apostle? She asked. Ning's eyes went wide as he realized who she was. The goddess of ether. Alexis. The carriage rattled for a good few seconds, making that the only sound in the carriage for that period of time. Ning was too shocked to even think and finally decided to learn a little more. You are Alexis, the goddess? Ning asked using sound energy through the spear. I believe that is the name I have been given throughout the eons. The woman spoke with a voice so beautiful that just made him fall for her even more. Don't let your thoughts go astray, Ning, he told himself. Don't worry. Your thoughts won't harm me, Alexis said from the side. She can read my mind. Ning thought. Yes, I can read your little mind, Alexis said with a little chuckle. Ahem, sorry about that, Ning said. Don't be, Alexis said. You don't have to apologize for me intruding your mind. Her beautiful voice with her gorgeous face was making it hard for Ning to concentrate. How can you read my mind, though? Does ether give such skills as well? Ning asked. He had read quite a bit about ether, but he never knew this was possible. No, I cannot read the minds of anyone else in this world. Only yours, Alexis said. That was one of the reasons why you caught my eyes the first time you came here 6,000 years ago. Ning felt quite a shock. You knew about me back then too? He asked. Yes, Alexis said. After all, not many people can come through the peak of afterlife. Although, you destroyed it, and I'm quite angry with you for that. Did you know how difficult it was to create a seal around that mountain? She asked. Ning felt another shock. You created that powerful seal? He asked. I think so. At least that's what I remember, Alexis said. My consciousness didn't fully develop until dozens of thousands of years ago. So old, Ning thought. I am, Alexis said. I read about you in the library of the tower. How much of it is true? Ning asked. What did it say? She asked. That you are the goddess of ether, and that you came down from the heavens and created ether to help men, Ning said. Is that what they think of me? She asked. Did I create ether? Or did ether create me? I don't know which came first, but it is true that I helped men with ether. Men weren't making use of ether, despite knowing about it, thinking it was taboo, so I came to them and helped them understand more of it, she said. I see, Ning said. So, why did you show yourself up to me now? Do you need something from me? Yes, Alexis said. I want you to continue to be my apostle. Well, you will have to wait 5 years for that, unfortunately, unless you can cure my body right now, he said. I can, Alexis said, giving Ning a bit of hope, but I won't do that. Why? Ning asked. Won't it be better if you help me get my body back so I can continue doing the work I was doing? It would, but I need a weak you right now, not the strong you, she said. I've seen you create things. So, you can create a new body too, right? Create a new one that has never seen ether before. A new body? Ning asked. Are you going to teach me how to use ether or what? Yes, Alexis said. I have seen you use ether, and while it's not bad, you still have a lot to learn. You also skipped a lot of ranks before learning to use ether, so you ended up not understanding just how strong you can get. Ning got a little curious. Why do you want me to learn how to properly use ether? Is there something you want me to do? He asked. Yes, I want you to take over the ether tower that has so much influence over the continent and use it to help everyone so that they can use ether again, she said. For that, you will have to defeat the person at the top of tower. The same one that poisoned you 10 minutes ago, she said. I have to fight and defeat that Perry guy? Ning asked. If you really can teach me to use ether in the most efficient way, then yes, I may be able to help you. All right, I will make a body for me then, he said. Do you have any specifications? Your previous body was absorbing ether even when you weren't doing anything. Can you stop that? She asked. Yes, Ning said. He just had to stop his automatic absorption after all. And do make it a dual awakener, Alexis said. Okay, Ning said and quickly gave the specifications for a new body to the system. The total energy required to make such a body was only a few dozen billion, so Ning was pretty okay with making it. Bright white light appeared in front of him and a body that looked a bit different from his usual body appeared opposite to Alexis. The body had the same height and build as Ning, except the face was a bit different. The nose was much pointier, the eyes a bit further apart, and the pupils of a slightly lighter brown color. It was just enough to make Ning still have the same body, yet look completely different. Ning switched to the new body, and at the same time, Alexis moved her hand to create a bunch of clothes directly onto the new body. She then looked at the new body and nodded. Thank you for accepting my offer, Alexis said. You are the only one that can help me, although, I won't be asking you to help me for nothing. I will give you an incentive to help me as well. An incentive? The new Ning asked. What is it that you can offer me? Alexis smiled and said, I can give you the location of the place you've been so desperately wanting to find. Ning's eyes went wide as he asked, You know where the origin is? Yes, I know where the origin is. And if you help me, I will take you there myself, she said. You should have told me earlier, Ning said. All right. I will beat that guy without any problem. Ning had found a reason to work for the goddess. With the location of the origin as an incentive, something that even his system wouldn't tell him about, he was going to be able to gather a lot of energy in such little time. He simply hoped that the origin had the same sort of time dilation that Kumiya had. Alexis looked at him with a gentle smile on her face, and Ning blushed a little when he saw her. She was too damn beautiful. Ning wondered if she had some sort of skill that was making her so attractive, and used his ether analysis to check on her. However, just as he did, he heard a notification coming from the system. Host is close to overexerting his mental capacity. Please take care. Damn, I nearly lost consciousness, Ning thought. That just went to show how powerful Alexis was in the ways of ether. Simply looking at her first layer of ether information, which simply gave her rank, gave him a head-splitting ache that far surpassed the likes of even the Lord of the Tower. Are you sure you need my help? You seem like you can do what you wanted to yourself, Ning asked while rubbing his head. He couldn't believe it would hurt him this much so that he nearly went into a comatose again. I have enough strength to defeat anyone I want on this planet, but I am not able to hurt anyone. For some reason, my moral instincts tell me to not interfere with humans. Me teaching the humans was already me going against my own instincts, but I could force myself because I thought that was helping the people, she said. However, hurting someone is something I can't even force myself to do anymore. This is why I decided to go with helping someone again. You, she said. Ning looked a little confused. There were things happening here that gave him quite a lot of confusion. Besides all that, there was one thing he desperately wanted to learn. System. Does she have a system? He asked. That was the only thing he could think of that would allow her to be as powerful as he was, and do things that weren't normally possible with ether. No. Ning felt surprised. He was plenty sure that he had come across another system user. However, that didn't seem to be the case. What's a system? Alexis asked confusedly. You don't have to know, Ning said quickly. He decided to change the topic quickly and asked, so, are you really a goddess or just a human that has lived a really long time? I do not know, Alexis said. The more I think of the past, the more clouded my memories get. I remember a time when there were normal animals roaming the forest. I remember when they weren't ether beasts yet. I remember when humans were barely coming to be in evolution. I remember these all, yet when I try to think back to it, I can't. It's a very weird sensation, she said. So you don't even know if you are a god or not? Ning asked. Alexis shook her head. I am just a being, I think. I might even just look like a human because I like how they look, she said. Ning felt like he could in some sense understand what she was. An archaic being, that never died, has a fascination with the human body, so you make yourself one. Was she perhaps an energy at some point that got sentience? He wished the system would stop hiding information about energy. What was it so scared of them finding out? What could it be hiding even? Ning looked to the front of the carriage, which by now he had come to understand was nothing more than a normal cart being pulled by the horses. He then put his arms forward and tried to create fire in his hands. He couldn't. I currently have no ether. What do you want me to do? He asked. Become an ether starter, she said. Okay, Ning said. He let the automatic ether absorption activate for a few seconds before closing it. All right, done, he said. Alexis looked at him and nodded. Good, stay that way for now. I will start teaching you after we reach our destination, she said. Oh right, Ning said, and he looked outside. Where exactly are we going? The surrounding around him now looked like it was a small pathway in the middle of a canyon. He had seen a few carriages pass next to them and looked at them, wondering what such an old-looking cart was doing in such a place. That reminded him. Wait, where exactly are we even at? He asked. He had been so preoccupied with finding out that she was Alexis that he didn't even bother to learn where he was. We're in the Jesnal Canyon in the Kingdom of Shalar, she said. And where are we going? He asked. The Kingdom of Shalar was an average place to stay at, but the Jesnal Canyon was not an ordinary place. It landed right on the border of the Kingdom of Shalar, Principality of Losmana, and the Freeland. Since he was seeming to leave the kingdom, he could only be going to one of the other two places. If he had to guess, it would be the Princey. The Freelands, Alexis said. The Freelands? Not Losmana? That is closer to the Ether headquarters, Ning said. We need to train you in a place where the Ether Tower has the most influence on the land. There you can show your skills and get pulled into the tower, she said. Since the Freelands has no monarch looking over them, the tower gets the most authority in that place, and is thus the only place we can go to. The Freelands lay in the mountain ranges of Yilal, so most of the cities and villages were either in the valleys or the mountains themselves. After the originally massive Sarian Empire came to its downfall, they could no longer regulate this mountainous area and had to thus give it up. The other kingdoms didn't want to bother with land this treacherous to travel in and didn't take over it either. So, the mountainous range that was free from any monarch's or government's rule came to be known as the Freelands. The Freelands were a bunch of cities that were ruled over by a city lord, but that was the extent of the rule. Even then, the people were quite free to do whatever they wanted to. That didn't mean there was no law, however. Since there were no monarch or government, the tower had come to become the main law-keeping force of the place. The cart rolled through a gravel road as it made its way to the bottom of one of the mountains. "Let's go," Alexis said and got off from the cart that came to a stop. Ning got off as well behind her, and then the cart set off on its own, the horses dragging it to who knew where. Alexis stood on the tall grass to the side of the gravel road, holding the spear in her hand as a makeshift staff. Ning could see the familiar image of Alexis he had come to see in the statue and the book he had learned about her in. "Come on, let's go get ourselves a house," she said and started walking into the trees that were at the foot of the mountain. This area of land seemed to not have any humans living close by. The closest humans Ning could see was about halfway up the mountain, the path the gravel road led to. Beyond that, the mountain was littered with houses. The city was up there and beyond in the valley behind the mountain. Alexis walked until she came across a flat area without many trees around her. She closed her eyes and bowed her head in a sort of prayer. Then, she opened her eyes and moved her hand. With that simple gesture, the massive trees all around her started getting pulled up from the roots. Ning watched with wide eyes as controlling so many of the things at once was not that easy to do. With another wave, the tree lost its branches, becoming a single, giant log. Those logs were then cut into 4 and planted around the area. Alexis then moved her hands and the branches that were cut off started letting go of the leaves in them and they were put on the floor and to the sides of the giant logs. Then, with no more items to use, Alexis started creating wood out of nowhere. Ning watched with simple astounding as the house they were to live in came to fruition. There was a small veranda at the front of the house, a 2-stairs staircase to lead up to the veranda, and a single door leading to a single-roomed house. "This will be where we will be staying for a few weeks," Alexis said. "Wow, you're amazing," Ning said. She really was. Ning wasn't sure he could make a house this quickly even if he were to ask the system. Just telling the system the specifications alone would take him longer. Ning walked up to the house, and up the veranda. He stomped on the wooden floor and realized that it really was quite strong. He then walked through the doorless door and entered the house. The single room he was in was quite massive, almost 10 by 10 meters, but there was one problem. Ning walked back out of the room and asked, "What are we going to do about the beds and furniture?" "We are going to do nothing. You are going to have to make the beds on your own," Alexis said. "Oh, okay," Ning said and asked his system for a bed, who started asking him for specifics. "And you are not allowed to use that little friend of yours that lives within you," Alexis said. Ning was confused. "I can't use my system?" "No, you will have to make the door, the bed, the chairs, and even the food, all by yourself," she said. Ning understood what she meant. She was trying to get him to be self-sufficient, but "I'm only an ether starter right now. Creating even the most little things will cause me to go into paralysis," he said. "Then you will just absorb a little ether and go back to work," she said. She walked up to the house and waved her hand to create a small chair for herself to sit at. "You better get to working now," she said. "The sun will set in a few hours, then you will have to work in the dark." Ning didn't worry about the dark. After all, he had the night vision skill that could make it seem like a day if he wanted to. However, the real problem would be the fatigue and hunger that came with this body. He couldn't work without any energy in him. This body would likely die if he didn't do something quickly. "I can sleep on the bunch of leaves if need be, so I don't have to worry about fatigue. I will need to think of food for now," he thought. He had a bunch of fruits in his storage at the moment, but he didn't want to use that. Alexis was going out of her way to teach him ether in a way that no other person in the world would be lucky enough to. If he somehow ruined this chance, he would be the biggest idiot in the whole world. "Right, I need to go find some food," he said to himself. "One more thing," Alexis said from the veranda. You are only allowed to use your ether for everything. Only use my ether? Ning asked. Yes, Alexis said. No using of hands or feet when it comes to the actual task you want to do. I will be able to tell it if you do. Sigh, okay, Ning said and walked off. He went around the forest looking for some fruit. Very soon, he came across some growing on the top of the tree. He wanted to teleport up there and grab it, but that wasn't allowed. He scratched his chin in confusion as using ether didn't seem to be usable here either given how low his ether amount was. That fruit is too far high. My little ether won't be able to reach that location, let alone have enough force to pull the fruit off of the branch, he thought. He needed to think of some other ideas. He needed to think of some other ways. If I weren't using my ether, how would I get that fruit? Ning thought to himself. The first way he could think of was to climb up the side of the tree and go grab it. That was basically what he would do with ether as well. However, that wasn't possible right now. He was too weak. Then, the second way was to throw a rock at the fruit and hope it falls, Ning thought. Ning looked down at the ground and picked up a small pebble about a quarter the size of the pear-like fruit in the tree. I can only use ether, he thought, and the pebble started floating in his hand. He would then have to use his ether to force Fu. Ning lost all control of his body and fell to the ground. He had been paralyzed. Damn it, he thought. Just that little use of ether and I'm down. He had really underestimated just how low his ether was right now. Having had so much ether for so long, he had forgotten what having little ether was like. He used the abyssal absorption technique and got back his ether a few seconds later. He didn't absorb a lot of ether as that would have likely brought him to the next rank, ether student. Alexis definitely had some plans with him as an ether starter. Once Ning got back on his feet, he decided to do the same thing again. Only, this time, he didn't hastily use his ether on the pebble. He first decided to think about what he was going to do. Floating the pebble required gravitational energy and that emptied by sea of ether very quickly. I need to use something other than gravitational energy. So, kinetic energy? Ning thought as he looked back up at the tree. Yeah, no other energy. Just a simple burst of kinetic energy on the pebble that should propel it in the direction of the fruit. If I can get my aim correct, I should be able to get the fruit to drop, Ning thought. He was sure about it. Ning got ready. With a single burst of use, he threw in all of his ether onto the pebble to hurl it upwards. He suddenly lost control of his body and fell to the ground again. Even as he was face down, he saw the pebble hit the branch next to the fruit and do nothing. Ning's aim was off by just a few centimeters. Again, he thought and absorbed a bit of ether to get back on his feet. He knew what to do now, so he just needed to keep doing it until he succeeded. It took him exactly 5 tries to get the fruit off of the tree. Ning gathered some ether again to heal his paralyzed state and finally picked up the fruit. He looked at the fruit with a little chuckle as he saw a part of it missing due to one of the stone hitting it directly. This likely won't be enough. Let's get some more, Ning thought. He went to the other side of the tree to get some more of the fruit and in less than 30 minutes, he had about 4 of them now. His aim improved a bit as well. Once he thought that he had enough for the night, he returned back to the small house. Oh, you returned quite fast, Alexis said. It hasn't even been an hour yet. Yeah, I got the food, Ning said. Where is it? Alexis asked. In my storage, Ning said as he brought out the 4 fruits. Remember what I said when you left here an hour ago? Alexis asked. What? Ning asked. That you are only allowed to use ether, Alexis said. Ning's eyes narrowed as he looked down at the fruits. You don't mean to say that I can't store it in my storage either, do you? He asked. That is exactly what I meant, Alexis replied. But these will go bad if I don't store them, he said. It's not even a cold climate. It's pretty hot out here. Then you will have to create something cold to keep it in then, she said. Damn, I should make ice to store it on my own as well? He asked. Yes, Alexis said. Although that can wait for later. Eat something if you're hungry and get ready. You have something else to do now. Ning nodded and ate one of the fruit he had before asking Alexis what he was to do next. Go take one of the branches there and half bury it on the ground, she said. Ning nodded and did as he was told to. He took one of the branches and half buried it so that it stood like a stump on the ground. All right, done. What now? He asked. Now, step a little back and light the tip of the stump on fire, Alexis said. Ning nodded and did just that. With a simple thought, a fire appeared on top of the stump that burned brightly even in the day. Ning nodded to himself and turned to Alexis. Now what? Put out the fire and try again, Alexis said from the veranda looking over Ning. Okay, Ning said and turned to put out the fire. As Alexis had made him understand by now, he was only to use ether for everything. He was about to use water to put it out, but he had to redo it again. If he used water, he would have to try extra hard. What was it? Oxygen. He remembered the few books on science he had read for the last few weeks now. He hadn't gotten the chance to read much about it in the tower, so he had to try the books in the city. Fortunately, they were enough to give him some ideas about it. To put out a fire, he just needed to starve it of oxygen. For that, he didn't need water. Some of the dirt on the ground moved up to the burning tip of the branch. Ning continuously absorbed ether, so as to keep up his supply of it. Once he brought up all of the dirt onto the fire and completely covered it, the fire went out. Phew. That was harder than I thought it would be, Ning thought. He really missed having more ether, but having less of it right now was helping him understand how to properly use it. He then used ether to move away from the dirt as well as he could and started the fire on the branch again. He looked at the fire before slowly turning back towards Alexis. What do I do now? Put it out and burn it again? He asked. Yes, Alexis said. Only, you will take one step back each time you light it up and extinguish it. Ning nodded and got back to his training. He took a step back and started putting out the fire again. The dirt was easy to pick up this time now that he was sure what he had to do. Once he put out the fire, he burned it again. It took Ning 2 whole cycles of burning and putting out the fire to see the purpose of the task. Now that he was about 3 steps away from the branch, the task of burning it started to get harder. It was just too difficult to create fire at such a distance away from him. Somehow, before the ether reached the branch to burn, it would dissipate along the way. This meant that they couldn't properly use ether at a distance. Enchantment was easier to perform, and invoking was harder. Ning had known for a while now, but due to his enormous ether, it was hard to see the difference exactly. Now he could. He had to focus very hard to make sure the ether didn't disappear along the way. Maybe I should just create the fire in front of me and send it flying to the branch, he thought. He created the fire and was making it move towards the branch when suddenly it disappeared. What? Ning felt confused. What just happened? No mixing of ether uses. Only use one of the two, Alexis said from the side. It had been her who destroyed the fire just then. How did she do it? I didn't feel the wind move or anything else appear there, he thought. I created a vacuum, Alexis said. A small point of reverse gravity that instead of pulling to it, pushes everything out. With nothing to feed on, your fire disappears. You will learn the skill soon, don't worry. Ning got back to practicing. For nearly 3 hours, until the sun went down, he kept on doing the same thing. By the end of it he was about 8 meters away from the branch, and completely exhausted. It started getting dark, so Ning let the fire keep burning for light and left. I'm incredibly close to breaking through to the next rank, he said. It felt really weird. His expensive body had no bottlenecks and he could consistently break through without even knowing he did. Now that he had bottlenecks, he was coming to understand just how hard it was for the common folks to grow as an ether artists. I was really having it easy, he thought as he walked back towards the house. He walked inside to rest while Alexis still sat outside. Only after he entered the house did he realize that he had nothing in it to sleep on. Right, the leaves, he thought and went back out. Make sure to use ether, Alexis said from her chair. What? Ning got a little distressed when he heard that. You can't be serious, right? I'm already so tired. No, I'm serious, Alexis said. Although, you may break through to ether student before you do so. Ning felt a little better hearing that. He quickly closed his eyes and started absorbing a bit more ether. Once he felt the bottleneck, he pushed past it and broke through. Suddenly, he felt a lot more invigorated. With the newfound energy, he brought out a gust of air that helped him fly the bunch of leaves to the room. He then went in and looked at it. Unfortunately, a bit of dust and small twigs followed the wind to come inside as well. He spent nearly 10 minutes looking through it all. Do you want me to set you a bed as well? Ning asked with a loud voice. However, he got no response in return. Alexis? He asked as he walked outside. The chair was there, but no one was sitting on it. Where did she go? He asked himself. He went out to look for her, but he couldn't find her at all. There's no reason to worry about her, he thought and went back into the room. She was a goddess, a rather powerful entity. Even if someone wanted to do something bad to her, they wouldn't be able to. Unworried, he laid down on his pile of leaves and went to sleep. System, give me a skill, Ning said. It had been a long time since he had to ask for a skill from the system. With how great his cultivation base was back in Kumiya and how good his ether rank had come to be in this world, he hadn't needed a new skill for himself. But now he did. Alexis had just taught him a very weird but fun trick he could do with sound. Apparently, if you sent a certain strength of sound onto some object, you could destroy it, given you could supply enough ether to create the sound. However, the strength of the sound required was different for each object, and he wasn't sure which was which. So, he decided to ask the system for a skill that would let him know. Apparently, someone had already requested such skill as the system quickly gave him a skill. The skill was called resonance. Ning could use the skill to create sound at the same frequency as the object's natural frequency and destroy it. While the skill used energy, Ning only wanted to use the aspect of the skill that told him the natural frequency of the object and the frequency he was producing. Once he got the skill, he went on to use it. He picked up a stone from the ground and checked its natural frequency. Once he got the answer, he started creating sound energy directly from the stone. He realized his frequency was really low, so he slowly changed it and started going higher and higher. Finally, when he reached the same frequency as the stone's natural frequency, he lingered for a moment and started increasing the sound while keeping the frequency the same. The stone started shaking so hard that in the next moment, it cracked into a dozen small pieces and fell to the ground. Phew! That works now, he thought. While it was quite unfortunate that he had to wait around for a while to reach the level of frequency to destroy the object. Surely things that are not stones will be easier to destroy, he thought. Come on, let's go now, Alexis said as she left the house. Ning looked back at the house. They were leaving this place today and he felt a little bad about it. It wasn't that he had become attached to the house, but rather the things inside it. He had made a great bed for him to sleep at. A few tables, some chairs. He had even made a place to keep foods cold that he was quite proud of. Now, he had to leave it all because Alexis didn't want him to take anything with him so that he could start it all over again. Ning felt a little salty about it all. Alexis didn't need to sleep, so she wouldn't know about the need for a good bed, but how was he to create the same bed all over again? It had taken him nearly a week to make it last time after all. He begrudgingly followed her, complaining to himself how she would always leave at night time for some reason. He had asked her where she went during the night, but she wouldn't answer it at all. He had asked the system, but it would simply tell him that she hadn't gone anywhere. It would never explain beyond that. The system really was weird when it came to talking about Alexis, as it seemed hesitant to explain more about her for some reason. The two of them walked up the mountain and finally went to the actual city in the mountains. It had been weeks since Ning saw any human figure at all. That included him and Alexis, as neither of them were human. The humans around him noticed them walking top the mountain. Surely it isn't that uncommon for people to come to the mountains, Ning thought for a while before realizing what was happening. Alexis was walking in front of him and everyone was looking at her. As expected, he wasn't a unique case after all. Every single human on Vilmore was attracted to her. However, Ning could see no lust in their eyes, only revere. They looked like people who had just seen a god, which they had. They walked around the mountain and went down the other side. Find an open area that doesn't have a house or is growing some crops, Alexis said. Ning nodded. The Freelands was just such a place. Every piece of land was free for anyone to grab. You could lay claim to the land as you wished and didn't have to pay any tax or anything for it. The only rule to keep the land was that you have to grow some crops in it, or build your house in it. If you claimed a piece of land and failed to do either of these things for a week, someone else could claim that land. That was the only law keeping people from hoarding land like in the other countries. Ning quickly found a small piece of land that didn't seem like it was owned by anyone. Even if it was, since they hadn't done anything in it, Ning could claim it and build something on it. We can use this area, Ning said. It was a small piece of land about 10 meters in length and 30 meters in breadth. It only had some grasses growing on it, so he would need to find wood from someplace else to build a house. He looked to the side and he could see the valley with the many houses down there and even a small tower. So the ether tower is here too, huh? He thought. He had heard of them being in specific locations around the Freelands. He hadn't expected one to be this close by. All right, you should make the house. I will go look for some food, Ning said. No, Alexis said. You will be making the house. Ning turned around. Really? He asked. Damn it. It was going to be a long and tiresome day. A few more weeks passed and Ning had safely gotten used to daily life. He would start his morning when Alexis woke him up. He would then train for a while with Alexis on things he told him to try or do. After nearly 5 hours of training, he would get something to eat and rest for a bit before training for the next 5 hours. After that, he would eat again and would use the next 5 hours as his free time, which he would use to go find food or check out the city. After the 5-hour period was over, he trained for nearly 8 hours, and finally went to sleep. The routine was exhaustive, but it was working. Ning was starting to get very good at using ether in ways he didn't know were possible before. It was early in the morning on a random day for Ning. The days had been monotonous, so he didn't really know how many days he had been here exactly. He was training with gravitational energy to see what he could do. He was training to crush a tree from the inside as he created what was practically a mini black hole. He put gravitational energy onto the center of the tree and pushed in as much gravity on it as possible, and soon, the tree started crumbling before being completely destroyed. Ning stopped and the black hole disappeared, leaving behind a fallen tree that had half of its trunk missing. Alexis nodded in approval. Great, you can do that now too, she said. There are a few more things I have still to teach you, but for now, you should go find a job for yourself. A job? Ning was a little surprised. We need money? No, it's just a job that is suitable for you. Go to the valley today, to the city lord's manor. They're going to announce something today, Alexis said. Oh, what is it? Ning asked curiously. For more, visit mtnovel.com. It would be better to find it out yourself. Go, you should be able to reach the place right as they announce it, Alexis said. All right then, I'll go, Ning said and left. He walked out of his house to the road and took the road all the way down to the valley. He had been there a few times, but each time he had only roamed it and did nothing else, as that was Alexis's order. The further Ning walked downwards, the more houses he started seeing. The valley was about 5 kilometers in radius, so it was quite big for a place that was considered to be one of the weaker cities in the Freelands. A decent-sized river went across the city right through the middle, separating it into 2 halves, that had now come to be known as either the Lord's side or the Tower's side, because of the city lord and the Ether Tower being located in either half. Despite being on the other half of the city lord's manor was next to the river, so it was still at the center of the city. The valley was full of nothing but houses, and rarely could Ning see a place or two with food growing in it. From what Ning understood, people did originally farm in this place. However, as they slowly stopped for some years and those lands got taken over by others who wanted to live there, the farmlands in the city started to dwindle. Now, the farmlands only existed on the mountainside where fewer people wished to live in compared to being safe near the tower and the city lord. Ning saw people moving, gossiping about something. Did the news of the announcement already spread? Ning wondered. He crossed the bridge atop the river and finally reached the lord's manor. The area was already crowded, so Ning was forced to stay quite far away. He waited for a while, and finally, a short man with a cane walked out of the manor. He had thick hair on the side, but barely any on top of his head. That look somehow seemed to suit his spherical head and body. He was almost 2 heads shorter than the next man that walked behind him. This man looked younger, which still put him somewhere around 35 years old physically. Ning could only guess his age physically, as his real age would be impossible to tell with analyzing him. After all, this man was an ether expert from the Ether Tower. A few servants walked by the side and held out a metal speaker next to his face, waiting for the old man to speak. Ahem. So I assume you all have gotten the news about the announcement, the old man said. I beg your pardon for trying to keep the announcement secret, as even until this morning, we weren't sure if this was happening. Only a few hours ago did we finally get the confirmation and are now going to announce it, the old man said. The crowd whispered amongst themselves, wondering what the announcement was about. Their city lord was certainly making it sound quite great. I will let Brother Waxel announce the news, as it pertains more to him than it does to me. The city lord moved backward. The tall person from the Ether Tower moved forward and took the speaker in his hands before speaking into it. As you all may know that some things have come to revelation in the last few weeks. Many of you may have even gotten your hands on it. Of course, I am speaking about the techniques that let people absorb ether as they want to, Waxel said. People started whispering again. They might have been a small city, but they had indeed come to learn about it all. The city that lay beyond the mountains had printed tons and tons of scrolls that taught people how to gather ether without being naturally gifted at it. Many people from this city had gone to buy those scrolls for quite some price as well. Because of this, many talented individuals that were previously unable to increase their ether ranks have now started popping up throughout the cities all over the world. This had become great news for many, but it has also become bad news because of some, Waxel said. Ning listened to it all and nodded. He had indeed thought about this problem when he started spreading the scrolls. But he couldn't stop improving the lives of the many because of a few people's bad thoughts. It wasn't like he could find out who would go on to becoming evil once they got stronger. Humans were a fickle thing, and their emotions were more fickle. Some had a change of heart more often than they changed clothes. Because everyone is now strong, people are starting to disobey the law because they have the power to do so. And we, as the keepers of law, are having a really hard time because of it. So, effective immediately, the tower for this city will now hire 30 talented individuals to help us keep the law. The crowd suddenly turned silent. Had they heard him correctly? Did they really just get the opportunity to join the tower? Some people immediately started questioning if this was volunteer work or not. This is an actual job with great pay, and all you will need for it is a great understanding of ether as well as having a high ether rank, Waxel said. Somebody shouted out loud and asked, "We have no knowledge of how to become a lawman. Do we still join?" Do not worry if you don't know much about law and such. You can learn plenty about it after you join the tower. You will go through an extensive course in the law and fighting tactics once you join. People started getting excited. Earning money was quite hard in this place where people got their lands for free and could grow food by themselves easily as well. Aside from that, the tower was the strongest organization in the world. Being a part of it meant that they would get status and protection like none out there. Since there will be quite a few people amongst you that will join, we will have to put you through some tests to see if you are capable. So, get ready for that, Waxel said. The crowd got nervous and excited at the same time. There is one more thing, Waxel said to intervene into the crowd's joy, turning them silent. They intently listened to what he was about to say. This information comes directly from the headquarters of the Ether Tower over at the Sarian Empire. If there are any of you that are exceptional in the ways of ether, the tower is willing to take you over to the headquarters to rear you as one of their own. If you are able to do that, there won't be anything in the world for you to worry about. Waxel put aside the microphone and left the stunned crowd. Suddenly, the crowd got rowdy. They rushed forward to try and be the first to apply for it. Ning stood where he was with a curious look on his face. I had thought the tower would lose influence once the people learned about the existence of absorption technique. But somehow they are using this opportunity to strengthen themselves. Not bad, Ning thought. Credit should be given where it was due. Ning chuckled a little to himself and walked forward to apply for it as well. Ning applied for the job. He named himself Terran Forn, just a random name he asked his system to come up with. Terran Forn was born in the kingdom of Shalar and had moved to the Freelands about a dozen years ago. He was 48 years old at the moment and had reached Ether Magister in rank as an enchanter. Being in the Freelands, he didn't have any identity on himself to prove his identity, and for some reason, the tower didn't seem to care if you put in the wrong information. Once done, Ning left the valley and went back up the mountain. He had a week before he had to go to the tower to see if he was even chosen for the first test that would narrow the number of people even further. Surely Ether Magister isn't so easily come by amongst these people, right? He thought. 48 years was beyond the range of someone that could enter the tower normally, but Ether Magister was strong enough so that he could make them feel they had missed someone. Also, since enchanters were so highly sought after in any battle-related job, Ning had decided to go with it, even though his skills as an invoker wouldn't pale in comparison during an actual battle. Ning could only hope that Terran got chosen by the next week. There was more to this, however. He couldn't just be chosen. He needed to be the best amongst the people who joined. After all, his primary target was to enter the headquarters of the tower and make his way up in ranks to fight the president. However, he could do that by showing off the skills he had come to learn in the last half a year. I should tell Alexis that our plans will have to be moved forward by a couple of years, he thought. However, he suspected she knew it already. That only made him wonder more about who she was, or rather what she was. God was a weird concept he couldn't understand. Normally, he would expect it to be a normal person or beast that was so powerful and wise, that everyone else took them to be something better than themselves. However, Alexis wasn't that. She wasn't human for sure, given that she existed for such a long time when humans could only exist for about 500 years in this world. Also, the fact that she seemed to be omniscient about almost everything made it impossible for her to be anything more than a system. But she doesn't have a system, he thought. This was starting to get confusing. What was a system even? There were way too many things that he didn't know about that the system wouldn't help him learn about. He didn't mind. After all, he had eternity to learn about it all. Ning went back home and found Alexis sitting on a small wooden chair in the front yard. He was surprised she stayed around, doing nothing during the day when she would disappear each night to go someplace else. Why doesn't she simply do what she needs to do at night right now? Surely she is just wasting her time here, right? He thought. Alexis smiled towards him. She had heard his thought and chose to not say anything. Ning walked up to her and asked, "What do we do now?" He somehow knew the answer that would come out of Alexis's mouth before she even spoke. You train. For more, visit mtnovel.com. A week passed in the blink of an eye. Ning was in the middle of his morning training, which included shooting a gun at something behind Alexis while she stood in front of it. At first, Ning wasn't sure how he could do that. After all, a bullet moved way beyond the speed of a normal human's comprehension to change its direction mid-air. Also, if he wanted to change the direction, it had to be mid-flight of the bullet. His ether couldn't move fast enough to reach a bullet that was on its way to the target. So, changing the direction of a bullet by directly changing the kinetic energy in the bullet was not a choice. He started thinking about what other possible routes he could go through. That was when he thought of using gravity to direct the bullet away. Ning aimed towards Alexis, but obviously at an angle that was aiming just outside her shoulders. He would have to shoot that area while simultaneously flaring the gravity on the wooden post behind her to pull the bullet towards it. That was exactly what he did. It all happened in an instant. Alexis stood still with no movement to her, while he heard the post behind her get destroyed. It worked, he thought. The moment he had shot, he created a massive gravitational pull at the center of the wooden post that had pulled at the bullet. He happily moved to the wooden post to see the result. When Alexis moved aside to show the result, his happiness dwindled like to almost nothing. It had indeed worked. But it had done more than just work. Using gravity, he had pulled the bullet towards the wooden post, but at the same time, he had pulled everything around the post, including the post itself. That couldn't be counted as success at all. If this was a true situation with a woman as a hostage and a criminal behind her, he would have not only shot the criminal but destroyed him from the inside. At the same time, he would have pulled the woman onto the criminal, killing her with the massive gravitational pull. Alexis had only survived because she was Alexis. Given the wooden post, magnetic energy wouldn't work either, would it? He thought. While magnetism worked on far fewer objects than gravity, it would still be strong enough to destroy the wooden post, while pulling at the iron in a human body around them. You seem to understand that simply using ether arts won't help you, Alexis said. Now, you need to start focusing your ether onto a single direction, rather than all.